honor to be here. I have to tell you, just sitting over here listening to Keith talk, first thing that blows my mind is Keith and I have obviously known each other for 30 years at this point, something like that. And so to see what Keith has built with all of you is just mind-boggling. And then just to be in the presence of you, I want you to realize that I would be very happy to be in the audience and to sit and take notes from many of you for 8 hours, and I'd have 100 pages of notes. So I really am in awe of this audience. I do think I can bring some value to you for a piece of the business, but please don't misunderstand. I am blown away by what this audience can do and what your team has been able to accomplish. Having said that, as I start, I appreciate the kind introduction from Keith. And I know that when you get an introduction like that, sometimes it's easy to put distance between yourself and the speaker. And you say, well, they must have been born with something special, whatever. And I do think I was born with something special, which is I'm just too stupid to ever give up. I literally just have the wind against the face of the mountain type of thing. In fact, my favorite phrase is, I'm eternal. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter to me if I beat you today, if I beat you 20 years from now, just eventually I'll just wear you out, right? And so that's my attitude. When I wanted to marry Maria, she didn't want to marry me. She finally said to me, how do you know we're going to get married? I said, I want to marry you more than you don't want to marry me. I will wear you out. That was before we started dating. A month later we started dating. A year later we got engaged. A year later we got married. And we've been married for 28 years now. And so everything I've accomplished just because I just wear the shit out. It's just, it really is true. So I don't think I'm like so unbelievably smart. Some of you know I spent 5 years as a freshman at Drexel, 1980, 81, 82, 83, and 1984. My parents were very proud, right? When I joined the business, it took me 4 years to make 50,000. Took another 4 years to hit 100,000. And so it was not like we were nonstop to the top, the fastest one out of the gate or anything like that, you know? But there are some things that we've learned over the years. And so one of the things I want to start with is years ago I heard Mike Sharp talking. And he was talking to a big group of vice presidents that weren't his vice presidents. And he said, listen, I'm not going to tell you to change what you're doing. He said, I just want you to take what I'm going to teach you and lay it on top of your system. And he was talking about how to treat people, how to treat the vice presidents, how to encourage people and build people and that type of thing. So he said, keep doing what you're doing, but just add this on top of it. And so what I would tell you about what I'm going to talk to you about today is don't change what you're doing. Just lay this on top of it, because I'm going to just talk to you about how to treat your clients, how to talk to clients. You're already at the kitchen table. If you just add a little into there, I promise you, there's huge opportunities. So I always think of McDonald's. You know, McDonald's started off with hamburgers, fries, and Cokes. And then they added shakes. And then they added, you know, fish sandwiches and Egg McMuffins and Big Macs and all the other things that they have today, and breakfast and coffee and whatever, right? Nobody looks at the McDonald's and goes up to the McDonald's and says, well, you're a failure because you sell too many Egg McMuffins relative to the amount of Big Macs that you sell. When you own a McDonald's, it's just all you care about is just the profit, right? Yep. And so one of the things that they do is if you go to a McDonald's or if you go anywhere, a smart place, when you place an order, they'll say, would you like fries with that? Who's ever heard that when you order something? Would you like fries? You go to a restaurant, would you like fries? Years ago they used to do, would you like to supersize that? They had to stop that because there was a movie about that. But they said, would you like to supersize that? Why? Because for 2 extra seconds, they could increase the bill by 10 or 15 or 20%, right? And over the course of a year, they look and they say it took really no extra time, but look at all the extra money that we made. Well, we found in the Primerica system the exact same leverage, where you can say to somebody, would you like fries with that? Would you like to supersize that? And it takes almost no time, the things I'm going to talk to you about, and you're going to go, oh my God, there's just so much money. The way I look at the business, honestly, is I call it shaking the money tree. Anytime I want to make money, I can just shake the money tree. It just falls. It's manna from heaven. It just comes down. It's just ridiculous how simple it is. And so it's almost embarrassing to say this, but I really want you to get a picture of this, okay? I work about 15 hours a week. Almost all of you work significantly more than I do. Marie and I have a very challenging home life. We have a lot of moving pieces in our world, okay? We love each other, we will be together forever. And every day, minute by minute, hour by hour, in our house, it is a challenge. We have a bizarre world that we operate in. One day, Keith and I were talking, this is some years ago, and I said to Keith, I said, I spend a lot more in my home life than my business. And Keith goes, what goes on in your house that you do that? I said, well, in the course of a week, I'll have 10, 15 different people come into my house that I'm paying for different things that we need. And so we have a lot of moving pieces. We also had some health challenges. I have an ongoing health issue that I'm dealing with right now. And so I wish I was back in my 30s where I could go, hey, I could work 80 hours a week or something like that. I really do. I think I could make $3 million a year in the business, maybe even $4 million a year. But in the 15 hours that I work, and I typically work about 9 months out of the year. I take about 3 months off, not consecutively. But as I'm working, something will pop up in my head and I'll say, I should stop. Because again, I've had some health challenges and something, it'll just say, just stop working. And then Maria and I will talk and I'll say, I don't know when I'm going to start back up again. And maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month later, something will pop in my head and I'll go, I'm ready again. Now I can start working again. And so it's kind of like a microwave, which is the way my life is. I'm not suggesting that any of you should work that way, okay? But what I am suggesting is because that's my life, I've still had to figure out how to win. Do you understand? You should not duplicate that. You should say, gee, that's the dream to do that. That isn't. I'm just saying that whatever you're dealing with, you can still figure out a way to win. It just might be different than what you expected, you know? And so let's, I guess I have the clicker here thing.
Hey guys, who's got an empty seat next to them? So you guys can grab a seat, please. We got seats, we got empty seats in here. You don't have to stand for the next 9 hours.
Okay. So let's get started here. So what I want to teach you is where the leverage in your clients are, the client base is. So the first thing that you have to understand is I recommend that everybody have a 90-day follow-up system. So what does that mean? 90-day follow-up system means every single client, for us, every 90 days, every securities client gets a call. Every 6 months, every life client gets a call. We're going to come back to that in a second. So what are the benefits of doing that? Well, the first is you get retention. I don't know if you know this, but when you sell a life policy, you get advanced money, but it really isn't your money. Advanced means they're lending you the money. It isn't your money until 12 months later after the policy's issued. So we'd like the clients to actually stick with us, right? When you do investments, the small money is the money that you do initially. I talk to people and they'll say things like, oh, I did business with this client, I made $2,000, $5,000, and that's fabulous, it's wonderful. And you go, man, I made $400 an hour, $600 an hour. That's great. That's the small money. That's the small money. The big money is the lifetime relationship of the client, right? Imagine if all the business that McDonald's did had to be new customers. The only business they could do is new customers. First time people walking in. Now compare that to your business. Is your business, all the money is new business, new clients coming in. What I would tell you is of course you want new clients, but wouldn't you like old clients still coming back? Yeah. You've got the relationship with them, right? And so the lifetime value of the client is where the gold is in there. And so I have a phrase which is if you don't take care of your clients, somebody else will, right? So years ago, when Keith and I remember this in the 90s, we had a CEO named Joe Plumeri, and Joe said, he had come from Smith Barney, and he said, you prime market people, he goes, you're the weirdest people in the world. He says, in Smith Barney, here's the way it works. He goes, we hire a stockbroker. That's what they used to be called back then. He goes, you hire a stockbroker. He goes, and they call their family and their friends, and they try to get investments, and they cold call, and they do it over and over and over, and 100, 200, 300 calls every day, 400 calls a day for 2-3 years, until they get 100, 200 clients. He said, once they get 100, 200 clients, he said, they never cold call ever again. He goes, they just work that client base over and over and over and over and over again. They get more referrals, they keep doing more business, additional business over and over. He goes, in Primerica, he goes, you work really hard and you get a client, and then you go, I never want to talk to you ever again. I'd rather go into a mall and prospect than go back to the initial client and work through the client. And I never forgot that. He goes, it's like walking into a gold mine, seeing some gold on the floor, picking it up and saying, I guess that's it. He goes, and you don't realize if you just dig a little into the walls, he goes, that's where all of the money is, right? Why do you also want to have a 90-day follow-up system? Because you catch money in motion. People change jobs. There's 401k rollovers. My assistant calls me 2 weeks ago. She says, oh, I called one of the clients up and he changed jobs and he's got a rollover. And I said, she goes, he needs to do something. So I called him over the phone and I said, we should just roll it into XYZ, the thing that we already had open for him. And he said, oh, okay, that's great. So I said, my assistant will set everything up for you. He said, okay, that's wonderful. It took me 7 minutes. I made $11,000. Okay? That happens every month for me. I don't mean occasionally. I mean every single month. Now some of you are going, oh my God, I would love to have that. You do have that, you just don't realize it.
Right.
You don't realize it because the person changed jobs and they gave the money to a bank, or they changed jobs and they just left it in their old 401k, or they changed jobs and they rolled it into the new 401k. You just didn't catch the money as it was in motion because there wasn't that ongoing relationship with them, right? They could retire, they get married, they get divorced, there's an inheritance, there could be lawsuits, selling of properties, there's additional business, there's always money in motion. And then the biggest piece is referrals. See, most people think the best referrals are when you're sitting across the table and you say, here you go, here's the form, fill this out, give me names and numbers. I'm not saying don't do that, you should do that. But the best referrals are after they're your client for years, because when they refer you to somebody, they say to their friend, trust me, I've known them for years, you need to work with them. That's very different than I met them last week, I met them yesterday, I just talked to them today. You should talk to them, they're really sharp. I'm not saying don't do that, keep doing that. But just realize the best referrals, the one with the most influence, are going to be the ones long term. So you have to have that relationship going on with that, right? Future recruits. I mean, we're going to talk mainly securities, investments, whatever, but realize that if I had to recruit 10 people this month personally, if I said, well, I'm back in the recruiting business big time and I got to hire 10 people, I would not be in a mall. I would be in my client base.
Right.
That's where I have my relationship. I'd be calling up my clients and I would just say to them, hey, how'd the last year treat you financially? And if they go, it sucks, that gives me an opportunity to talk to them about making some extra money in Primerica, doesn't it? Right? Just keep the relationships. I remember Maria years ago would talk about how whenever she wanted to get recruiting going again personally, when she said, you know, we got to go widen the base, we need more people, she would just call up people that quit the business in the past. But she always kept relationships with people. She would just call people out of the blue. This is before the days of texting, so it's even easier today. She'd call people out of the blue. Hey, just want to check in, see how you're doing, hope things are going well. Miss you, I think you're the world of you, blah, 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 whatever. And then at some point, because she had that ongoing relationship, she could say, you know, things didn't work out, but I think it was just the wrong timing. We should do this again. Things are going to be, it'll be different. We'll do it together. It'll be wonderful, blah, 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 whatever. So you go, yeah, but the people I hire, they're all losers. Okay, let me give you two stories. In 1983, somebody hired Hector Lamarck, and Hector Lamarck was a loser, and he quit the business. In 1984, somebody different rehired Hector. And for whatever reason, the 1984 model of Hector was much better than the 1983 model, and now Hector's made $1 bajillion. The person who originally hired Hector never overrode him, never made a penny. All they had to do was maintain the relationship, right? Okay, let's move on. Okay. Whenever there's a life change, I just want people thinking of me and really nobody else. So let's talk about the initial interview. That's what I call the first appointment. I know some of you do one appointment, you close on that appointment, that's fine. If I say something that contradicts what you're doing or what your upline is doing, I'm wrong, they're wrong. Okay, I'm not looking to sow problems in the audience. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. But I will show you the way that I work with people, okay? So the initial interview, I know people say presentation. I always refer to it as an interview because that's how Art Williams referred to it. And so I ask 2 questions at the end of every first appointment. The first question is, what type of relationship are you looking for with the financial professional you choose to work with? And sometimes people say, I'm not sure, I have never thought about it, and then they have to think it through. But typically you get answers like, I want somebody who's honest, trustworthy, somebody who puts my needs first, somebody who's got a good plan, somebody who returns my phone calls, somebody who follows up, somebody who reaches out to me if they think there's changes or adjustments, just really simple things. And the husband and wife is telling me, and I'm just writing it down on a piece of paper. After that, I then say to them, if it was 5 years from now and I'd been handling your accounts for you, and you were totally satisfied with me, tell me, what did I do? And then I wait again. And they typically say things like, well, you helped us handle our debt, or you helped us develop a great plan, or we feel like we could retire now, we have more security, you did what you said you were going to do, you put our needs first, you gave us a plan, you followed up. What are just simple, basic things they'll say. Nobody says you doubled my money, nobody says you made 50% a year, nobody asks for a guarantee. It's realistic stuff. Now, why is this really important for you? Well, there's a couple things. First, from the perspective of helping people, you can't meet somebody's expectations unless you know what they are. So it's probably smart to find out what it is that they're expecting. Second, from a sales perspective, asking somebody to imagine 5 years down the road where they're working with you and totally happy and satisfied is a very powerful thing. Because that causes them to imagine that relationship with you. And that makes them happy. And they look at you different after they answer that question. After I'm done those two questions, then I simply say to them, I simply say to them, let me explain to you how I work with my clients. And then I say to them, let's say I was talking to Glenn and Z, I'd say, Glenn Z, let me explain to you the way I work with my clients. You can tell me if this meets your needs. Anything we do together financially, let's say like an IRA as an example, every 90 days you'll receive a statement. Obviously 24/7 you have access to the information, but every 90 days when you receive information, I do a client review, and you'll get a call either from me or my assistant every 90 days to see if you have questions, concerns, anything that you need an update on. Now typically the way that it works, Glenn and Z, is if I see that there's something that needs to be addressed in your account, you'll deal with me and only me. So anything to do with advice, you'll deal with me. If I do the review and I say everything is the way I expect it to be, then my assistant will call you and she'll say, Howard did the review, doesn't have anything specific to discuss. Do you have questions, concerns, anything that you need? And if you do, then I'll jump on the phone with you. And I just found that's an efficient way to be able to work with people. And then in addition to that, once a year, and this is totally up to you, so it's on your request, but once a year, I'm happy to review everything with you and kind of go through everything soup to nuts to see if there's changes or adjustments or whatever. And of course, there's no cost to that whatsoever. Tell me, Glenn and Z, how does that meet your needs? Is there anything over and above that that you think you'd need? Now, let me tell you what you get every time. What you get is oh no, that'll be amazing. No, that's better. Nobody ever calls us. Nobody's ever helped us. We've never had that. That would be incredible. Yeah, that's so much better. Typically, the spouses look at each other and laugh and giggle. And then they say things like, oh, we're going to love working with you. Now, keep in mind, I have not made a recommendation yet. But they've already mentally bought into working with me. In the last 7 years, if I've had 7 people not do business with me, that would be a lot. I've gone years without one no. And I'm going to walk you through exactly why that is. Because again, I don't have a lot of time in my life. So I remember Mark Shazani telling me years ago, you walk outside your house, you go kill something, you drag it home, and you feed your family. When I walk outside my house, it is to be productive. Right. I am not going to work if I cannot be productive, if I cannot win. So I stack the odds so that everything's in my favor. You follow me? When I go back on that second visit, I'm going to repeat back to them what they said to me on the first. Now, last time I asked you about this is what you told me, this is why I'm making these recommendations based upon what your needs are, your expectations, whatever. But typically, most people at that point have already mentally hired me because their expectations are so low in terms of the way they've been treated in the past. Do you follow me? Now, so I just said to you that's really important in the way I work with people. Well, I can't say that if I don't have a 90-day system, correct? So if I have the system, then I get to brag about it and I get to use it as leverage. If I don't have the 90-day system, not only am I not following up and losing future business, but I'm not nearly as effective initially in working with the client. You got that? Yes. So you say, well, Howard, that sounds like a lot of work. I got a lot of clients, that's a lot of phone calls. It might be true. I hope you do have a lot of clients. That's why you need administrative help. I didn't say I make the phone calls. I just told you I don't work a whole lot. Somebody's making calls, but it ain't me. And so you need administrative help. So let's go through the numbers first. I have, a couple days ago, I said to knowing I was going to do this, I said to I have two and a half assistants, okay? So I have 2 full-time and then 1 part-time assistant. And I said to my main assistant, I said, hey, what I'd like you to do is log every phone call that comes into the office for the day and every phone call that you make outgoing, and just tell me what it is, because I really have no idea. So at the end of the day, she says 107 phone calls. So I said, how did that compare to the past? Is that a lot? Is it a little? You know, is it a busy day, slow day? She goes, no, that's fairly typical. And I thought to myself, how in the world could I run my business if I was making 107 calls for administrative things, if I was answering 107 calls, if I was sitting there saying, oh, hold on, let me upload this app, let me call the home office, did you get that? Okay, let me make sure it's initialed properly. What do you mean it hasn't been received? Hold on, let's do a three-way call over to the mutual fund company. Oh, we didn't get this money transferred yet, let's follow up with this. Well, the paramed isn't scheduled, the paramed was lost, this was done, that was done, medical records haven't been sent. My head's already hurting more than it normally does, just thinking about that. And yet so many of you do that.
Right.
Because you say, oh, well, it's not a big deal. It's just a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there. A surgeon does not wheel the patient in.
Right.
A surgeon does not clean the room. A surgeon doesn't get the medical instruments ready. The surgeon goes scalpel. A great surgeon doesn't even close. A great surgeon has a lesser surgeon close because they need to go on to another surgery that requires their high level of skill. So what are you all best at? Kneecap to kneecap. You're best talking to people, recruiting people, prospecting people, overcoming objections, getting people into school, getting past the test, getting business, getting referrals. That's where the money is. If you can pay somebody $10 or $12 or $15 an hour to answer the phone for you, to make sure that something's uploaded properly, you shouldn't be doing that. Right. Now you might say, oh, it's not a big deal. It is. Not only is it costing you time, which is the only thing of great value in life. You can always make money, but you can never get time back.
Right.
But not only is it costing you time, it's costing you focus. There's a book years ago that was written, The E-Myth, The Entrepreneurial Myth. And in the book, the guy says, hey, most people that start their own businesses really didn't start a business, they really bought a job.
Right.
He said, so if they love baking, they open up a bakery, and they find out that they really have a job, and it's 24/7, and all they're doing is whatever. He said, what you really need to do is, if you're going to get big, is you need to pull back, and you need to work on the business, not in the business. So one of the benefits I've had over the last 7 or 8 years is I've had a chance to be at a distance and look at my business and say, where is the money? Where is the production? What are the things that actually grow my business as opposed to the things that keep me busy? See, when Jim Meyer calls me, he never says to me, how many calls did you make today? He never says, how many appointments did you go on? All of you as VPs, you know that Keith or your uplines aren't calling you doing that. What they're talking to you about is the results. Now, new people, we talk to them about activity because they're new and they don't understand how to control results. But the more experienced you get, in the end, the only thing that matters is results. That's it. If you can go out there and you can do $30,000 or $40,000 of business, personal, and you can do it working 10 hours or fit, nobody cares. And if it takes you 50 hours to close one life sale, same thing. Nobody cares that you worked 50 hours. It's just one life sale. That's all it is. And so when you get a chance to pull back, you get a chance to be very strategic, to be able to say here, and so it gives you a chance to think. You have to have administrative help. Meyer told me years ago he had an administrative person when he was a district. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Right? Okay, so a lot of times people will say, well, I got to wait until I can afford to do it. You can't afford not to do it. That's just what I would tell you. You can't afford not to do it. Well, some people go, well, I'm not ready yet because there isn't enough business. Well, there isn't enough business because you don't have administrative help. If you get administrative help, you'd have more business that would come in. If all you did was hire somebody and say, you know what, just call every single client that I have. That would take up enough time, wouldn't it? So let's talk about the 90-day phone calls. So I said I don't make the phone calls. So how is it done? It's very simple. My administrative person makes 10 calls a day. Now 10 calls a day, 50 calls a week. There's basically 13 weeks in 3 months. So 13 weeks times 50 is 650 calls. Now, if you make a phone call, that phone call could cover the husband, the wife, and the children, correct?
Right.
So you might have a family as clients that have 3 or 5 or 4 or 5 or 6 accounts. So 650 calls could cover 1,000 or 2,000 accounts. Okay? Almost nobody in this audience has 1,000 or 2,000 accounts. There's a handful of you that do. Okay? But my point is right there, that just handles everything. Okay? 10 things a day. I have a little larger client base, so I have two assistants that call every day, 10. So I have 20 calls a day, 100 calls a week, 1,300 calls every 90 days. And that way I know for a fact every single client is getting touch base. How do the calls go? Really simple. Let's say that they're calling Keith. They go, "Hi Keith, this is Christina. I'm calling from Howard Lashner." So, oh, by the way, here's the best thing about the system. Nobody answers the phone. And I know that pisses you off when you're trying to recruit people. And when you're trying to schedule appointments. But when you're calling as a follow-up like this, the fact they don't answer the phone, that's actually positive. So 8 out of 10 times nobody answers the phone. So between the phone ringing and leaving a message, it's a minute and a half. So 8 calls takes 12 minutes. The 2 calls where they answer, one of the 2 calls, they will answer and say, "Oh, thanks very much, I don't need anything," and it'll be short. One of the 10, they will actually say, "Thank goodness you called, I do have some questions." But typically the questions are administrative questions. They're typically, how do I change my PAC? I need to change my checking account. The address wrong. I found out my name was misspelled. I didn't get my 1099 yet. I can't get on the website. Something, something, something. Why am I involved in that? Nothing. That doesn't require me. The administrative person handles all that. Now, 1 out of every 50 to 100 calls, they actually need me. And typically, those generate income. Now, sometimes people just say, "Oh, I need your advice. Should I pay off my mortgage? Should I this? Should I that? I started a new job. I want to talk about my 401k. That's fine. I don't mind that. That's fine. That's just a fun, simple 2-minute, 5-minute conversation. But the real phone calls are done by somebody else. And so the call goes like this. "Hi, Keith. This is Christina. I'm calling from Howard Lashner's office. Howard did his review. Doesn't have anything specific to discuss with you. But he wanted to find out if you have any questions, concerns, if you need a review on anything. Howard loves working with you. He's really committed to it. Anything that you need, please call. He's happy to help. My name is Christina. Again, here's the phone number." Now, what happens? Do they call back? No. They just get the message. And what do they hear? All they remember is Howard Lashner. They don't remember anything else. And every 90 days, 4 times a year, they hear Howard Lashner, Howard Lashner, Howard Lashner, Howard Lashner. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years down the road, they change jobs. And when they change jobs, they go, "You know, I got to roll my 401k over with Howard Lashner because he's so fabulous because he calls every 90 days. Now, the truth is, I don't call every 90 days. Somebody else calls. They don't log it in that way. Okay, my sister-in-law, Josephine, told me a story last year, and I might butcher this a little bit, but the concept is right. She had a client she did business with 15 years ago. Never talks to the woman ever again. Calls her every 90 days for 15 years. She starts questioning whether or not she's even got the right number because the woman's voice isn't on the outgoing message. It's like a computer thing. But she just keeps leaving the message every 90 days, every 90 days, every 90 days, every 90 days. Last year, the woman calls up out of the blue. Says, "I don't know if she inherited money or something like that." And she goes, "I have $600,000-$700,000 I need to roll over. My friends have told me that they have other people they wanted to refer me to, but I said to them, nope, I wouldn't work with anybody but Josephine because you're the best, and you've treated me the best all these years." Josephine's laughing, going, "We haven't even talked for 15 years. But the woman's heard Josephine's name 60 times over 15 years. So I kind of think about it like tag you're it, right? I want to put or branding. Hey, that's a bad example, but like, a rancher would brand the cattle, right? Hey, if you're my client forever. Hands off. Don't ever think of going to my client. That's my client, right? I'm going to brand that client. How do I keep that client as my client for all eternity? I have my assistants call every 90 days. So what does that wind up actually costing? Well, to do 10 phone calls, it's probably somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. Let's call it 30 minutes. Okay, so 30 minutes, five times a week, 2.5 hours. Okay, let's say you paid the person $15 an hour, okay? For a starting thing, many people would pay even less, but let's say $15, okay? So if it's 2.5 hours times $15, so it's $37.50, times 4 would basically be 150, call it 160 because there's a little more than 4 weeks in a month. 160 bucks. Times 12, $1,920, call it $2,000, okay? So for $2,000, you can have 1,000 clients called every 90 days. And if you're a VP, and one of them rolls over one 401k for 100,000, you can make $2,000 or $3,000 just like that in no time. So why wouldn't you do that? It makes no sense not to do it. It's just free money. It's just sitting there. Would you like fries with that? Why wouldn't you just throw that line in to do it? People go, well, I can't. You can afford $2,000 because of the money you make. No, I make the money I make because I pay the $2,000. Right? It comes after the fact. You can't look at a fire and say, give me heat, then I'll give you wood. Right? You have to chop the wood first, then you get the heat after the fact. Right? It's a very, very simple system. Okay. So how do you find the right administrative person? That's always the challenge. Okay? So I'm going to give you the things that I think are important. Okay? By the way, the company's made it very clear to me that I cannot try to sell the book that I wrote because that's an outside business activity, so I am no way trying to entice anybody to purchase the book. In the book, though, it does go through these types of things, okay? But here's why I say that, okay? Because finding the right administrative person is really important, okay? And what you need is first you need somebody that can multitask. I cannot tell you how many people I've hired over the years that I've had to fire that have said, me, I'm the best at multitasking. I can handle 1,000 things at the same time. I'm unbelievable. And then you hire them and they're just completely overwhelmed at like the first task that you gave them, right? So just because somebody says it doesn't mean that it's true. So you got to be fast to fire, okay? Not too fast, but when it's the wrong person, it's the wrong person. Next is they have to be able to think on their feet. They have to be fast, a fast mental processor. Somebody that says, listen, I'm slow and methodical, that's wonderful. That is not who I'm talking about. You need somebody that thinks fast, okay, that can handle lots of things. You need somebody, look, there's How to Raise Your Income. Who wrote How to Raise Your Income? Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill wrote in How to Raise Your Income that there is 2 types of people who never get ahead in the world. The first type is the people who can't do what they're told to do. The second type is the people who only do what they're told to do. You don't want to hire somebody who goes, well, you didn't tell me to do it, so I didn't do it.
Oh my God.
Right? You want somebody who says, I know what you told me, but I've got your back. I'm going to make sure that you look good. I'm going to cover you to make sure you're okay. Same thing with the clients. Client calls up, client goes, I need to take $5,000 out of my IRA. Person goes, okay, help you take $5,000 out of the IRA. What you want is somebody who goes, well, wait a second, you've got 2 accounts. One's an IRA, one's just a regular non-qualified account. Why wouldn't we take it out of the non-qualified? Why would we have you pay penalty and taxes? But the person who isn't thinking, who just goes, that's what I was told to do, I'll do it, winds up hurting the client because the client doesn't realize they're saying the wrong thing, right? So we've got to have their back. My assistant, my main assistant, has studied me. She knows how I think. So she says to me, at the end of an appointment, she'll interview me. Okay, are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? Do you need this? Do you need that? Whatever. She pre-fills in everything for me. I don't touch paperwork. I don't do anything. I love doing annuities now. Not because they're annuities, but because we can do online. And so I love Annuity Pro. Now, why do I love Annuity Pro? Because Christina fills in 99% of it. When I'm with the client, it's initial and sign, Elvis has left the building. Okay? My eyes aren't good. My hearing's going. I am like 2 months away from being Helen Keller, okay? So I need something super simple for me, right? So I have everything pre-filled in. I don't look at that. I don't know how Annuity Pro works. I don't want to know how Annuity Pro works. Some of you know too much about the administration. I used to. I know where that is. I did every IBA, every life app. I processed everything personally. But there's a certain point where you got to say, I got to get big. And so you got to give that up. Now some people go, well, it won't be done right if somebody else does it. Okay, well then what you're saying is you'd rather be small. You can't get big and control everything. It's as simple as that. You just can't, right? There was a time that Jeff Bezos was in his house labeling books and mailing them out to people from Amazon, right? If he wanted to get big, he had to turn that over to somebody else, right? Okay, what else? You need somebody who's always happy and upbeat, meaning never let them see you sweat.
Yep.
If you have an administrative person who, when they get stressed, they take it out on people, gots to go. Gots to go, okay? Listen, it's one thing if I talk to my administrative person and I hear tension and I go, look, I know it sounds like you're a little overwhelmed right now, let's talk. That's different, okay? Nobody's perfect, but never to a client.
Right.
Clients should never, ever feel like that sharp tone, like, look, I'm busy right now, right? Boom, out of here, right? Next thing, they should never be overwhelmed. They should be securities licensed. They're not going to be securities licensed the day you hire them. But ultimately, you'd like to get them securities licensed. If they're securities licensed, they can do things that you'd have to do otherwise. What's an example? A client calls up and says, can you tell me my account balance? If they're securities licensed, they can get an account balance. If they're not securities licensed, apparently you can't. If they're securities licensed, they can do a three-way call to someplace and help with having the money withdrawn or transferred or changed or whatever. So it just makes your life easier. So it could be somebody that's in your base, could be the spouse, a partner of somebody in the base, could be somebody that was in the base that quit but was a really nice person that you really like, could be somebody that says, I need extra money and you know, whatever, and you say, okay, good, maybe we can do both at the same time. But you have to find somebody to be able to do that, right? They have to be able to see the problems before they occur. They have to make you look good. So what do I mean by that? Okay. Application comes in, an account comes in. My assistant notices that a person's last name is misspelled. So what do? She calls, she changes it. She calls the client and she says to the client, by the way, Keith, I want to let you know, Howard caught a mistake. Your name was misspelled. It had one T, not two T's. It's already handled. You'll probably get something in the mail, but I just want you to know Howard already handled that for you. Then she calls me and says, by the way, this is the message I left. This is apparently what you did. And I say, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now, why is that important? I refer to that as protecting the crown. If I have no credibility, they don't have a job. Do you understand that? This is a team, right? Whether it's the New York Giants, right? Or, the Lee, I don't know what your team name is, the Lee Dragons. Thank you, I do know that. Right, the Lee Dragons. It's a team, right? You need credibility. Everybody wins with that. So they have to be able to protect you and make you look good, right? And then they have to obviously be able to communicate well with you. I had some assistants in the past where they would start talking to me, and I would say to them, okay, well, let's start at the end. I don't need all these details. Just give me the bottom line. And I'd be waiting, and it would be 3 minutes and 4 minutes, and I'd say, I still haven't heard the question. And I would get really frustrated because I got to move fast in life. And I would try to teach them how to communicate with me, and it almost never worked. And so I found that there's just certain people that they can't get something out in 5 seconds. It's got to take them 10 minutes. They have to tell you, okay? So you go, well, tell me, how was the meeting? Well, I walked in, the room was about 50 feet by 100 feet. The lighting was, no, just tell me about the meeting. Well, when we first got there, there was a table for a sign-in table. Tell me about the meeting. Well, the way it was set up was, okay, you need somebody who can be fast with you. Here's what you need to know. If I want more details, I will then say, I need more details. But my assistants understand, just give me the end. Start at the end, and then I'll decide whether or not I need the rest of the details. Howard, I called so-and-so, a name was misspelled, I corrected it, called them, let them know that you handled it. We're done. I don't need to know anything else. Don't tell me how it was misspelled. Don't tell me who you called at the home office, or that there was paperwork, or you did it online, or there's a new system for it. I don't care. I don't want to know that. I want to know how to make money. Do you understand that? I don't know how electricity works. It's fine. I've done just fine in life not knowing how electricity works, right? I know enough to use it, and that's it. That's how you want to be as you grow your business, right? You need to make sure it gets done. It does not mean that you have to do it. Okay, so where do you get started immediately making money? You can look at your assets under management. Now, on the assets under management, you can print out the old thing that shows, page by page by page. There's, 50 pages, 100 pages, whatever, shows every single account. In the old days, we used to do that. You can go to CAM, Client Account Manager. You can go to CRM, Client Relationship Manager. They all have different ways of kind of slicing and dicing, okay? For CAM, of which I do not know how to do this, and I don't want to know how to do this, but I know that you can run reports with CAM, and you can slice and dice your client base however you want. So here's simple things. If I was any one of the vice presidents in here, so you've all been vice presidents, you're here for a while, you've got some years under your belt, you've got dozens and dozens of clients, potentially hundreds of clients at this point. If I switched places with you, and you said, Howard, can you grow my income by $100,000 to $250,000 in the next 12 months in my world, just like this. So unbelievably simple. So I'm going to tell you exactly what I would do to do that, okay? Number one, I would look for everybody that's 59 and a half and older. Why? Because there's something called in-service rollovers. In-service rollovers are what I refer to as a get-out-of-jail card for people that have a 401k or a 403b or the thrift savings plan through the government or a 457 for a municipality. All it basically says is for years, I'd sit with a client was 60, I'd say, how much money you got? And they go, well, I got $15 in my checking account and $500,000 in my 401k. And I'd go, one day when you retire, hopefully I'll get that rollover. And then suddenly somebody says to me, they might be able to roll it over while they're working. And I went, well, what do you mean? And they went, yeah, sometimes in a 401k it's set up that it allows you to roll the money over. The 401k stays open. It's like having a checking account that had $500,000. You write a $500,000 check and it has nothing. And then the next day you start depositing money and you start building it up again. So all of a sudden I started to go, oh my gosh, there's unbelievable amounts of business. Now, is it always appropriate to roll over or do it in service? No. Obviously, every situation you have to make sure it's appropriate. The wonderful thing is typically most plans, and by the way, 70-80% of all plans allow it nowadays. Okay? But typically, most plans, it's at age 59 and a half or above. Sometimes it's 62, sometimes it's age 65, sometimes it's 70. I was with a client once where he was 48. He was able to do it at 48 years old. It's very unusual how they set these types of things up. But 59 and a half is, most times it's going to be there. So why is that good? Because we have solutions that we can offer to our clients that aren't available in their 401ks. So if it's solely going from a mutual fund to a mutual fund, that's a different conversation in terms of value. But if it's going from a mutual fund into something that provides some type of a guarantee, whether it's a fixed indexed annuity or the new buffer annuities with AXA and Bright House, or if it's something that has a living benefit like a variable annuity, totally puts it into a different world. You're able to provide them something that isn't available. Do you follow me? So it's a huge benefit. So if you go out there and you said, okay, I'm going to look at my client base, and I have 100 clients that are 59, and by the way, 100 clients really just means a husband or the wife. So if you have 50 people, if you have 50 married people as an example, you've got 100 possibilities, right? So out of the 100, how many of them have an opportunity to do an in-service? Well, the answer is going to be about 70. Of the 70, how many could you get? Well, minimum, you'd get half. Minimum, okay? I think you should get 98%. But let's say that you got half. That's 35. Okay, so how much business are you going to do on a rollover with somebody who's 59 and a half or older? Well, on the low side, it'll be $50,000. On the high side, it could be $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, maybe $1 million. Let's just use 100,000 as the example. Typically mine are larger than that, but let's say 100,000. So here you just called 50 clients, husband and wives, that are 59.5 or above. You're able to do $3.5 million of business. Now at the vice president level, if you're doing annuities, you make 3.1% on most of the stuff. Okay, 3.5 million times 3.1%. Anybody? I think it's $108,500. Okay, approximately. That's not bad. So if I stepped into your world today, in 30 days I can make $100,000 if we had that 100 clients that were 59.5 or above. Do you see how simple that is? Now, by the way, you might say, yeah, but Howard, I still got to recruit and whatever. Okay, then don't do it every single day. But do it or somebody else will.
Right.
The business is there. If you're McDonald's, you sell coffee because there's a percentage of people that want coffee. If you don't offer coffee, there's a percentage of people that will never come in and buy an Egg McMuffin. Because they will go to Dunkin' Donuts instead or Wawa and they'll buy the coffee there and go, I'll get a sandwich from them instead. Right? So everything ties together. Why is Apple so powerful? They drive me crazy. But the genius of Apple is they have an ecosystem. Once you're into Apple, people go, oh, I can't switch. It's too much of a pain in the ass to switch. You kid, I got an iPhone, I got an iPad, I got this, I got that, I got, you know, it's ridiculous. Everything fits together. Well, why do they do that? Because they don't want you to be able to leave, right? That's how you want your clients to feel. Have you ever sat with somebody who's got life insurance, maybe with Allstate or State Farm, and you go, oh, we'll move your plan over, we'll switch it, and they go, well, I've got car and homeowner with that. In their mind, it's this unbelievable impediment. Oh, it's just too stressful to even think about that. Right?
Right.
So if that's the case, why don't you get that working for you instead of against you? Why don't you get so much stuff going on so there's stickiness, so they can't leave you? So somebody comes up and goes, oh, you should do business with me. And they go, no, I can't. You can. This person's got my IRA, they've got this, they've got kids' accounts, they've got, they've got my life insurance, they help me with wills, they help me with this, that, whatever. Just, you want it to be to the point where just nobody can get in, and you own the client forever. Do you get that? You understand
Yes.
that? Okay, so let's go to the next one. Federal employees. So let's say nobody in your business, none of your clients are 59.5 or older. I've taken over your business. I've bought out your solution number. I've bought out your client base. I take over. I do CAM, a search. Nobody is 59.5 or older. Okay, so how am I going to make big money fast in your market? Very simple. All I do is I look for people that are federal employees. By the way, post office employees technically aren't federal, but it's kind of quasi-government agency, so it fits into the same world. All federal employees have access to something called the TSP, Thrift Savings Plan. It's like the 401k. So at 59.5, you can do an in-service, guaranteed. It's very simple. Okay? By the way, I got to digress on the in-service. I have to mention something. The way you know if somebody is eligible for an in-service is you do a 3-way call. Not to the company, not to HR. You do it to whoever is handling the investment. So if it says Vanguard or Fidelity or Principal, that's who you call. And 99 times out of 100, it's a recorded line, which you want to be on a recorded line because it'll protect you. The client gives permission for you to ask questions. Normally, I ask 2 or 3 non-important questions. Oh, what's the expense ratio on this fund? Do you have, what's the interest rate on the money market? Something. And then I say, by the way, does the plan offer an in-service rollover? And if so, is the client eligible for this? If they say yes, sometimes they say, well, it offers it, but it's 62 and they're not old enough yet, or 65 or something. And if that's the case, the first thing I do is I call my assistant and I tell her to put into the calendar to remind me 4.5 years from now. Every year I go into the year with my assistant saying to me, you got to call this person because 2 weeks from now they turn 59.5. 3 weeks from now they turn 62. Every year I go and I have millions of dollars of business that's just lined up. It's just the easiest thing in the world. I have not appointments, but I have follow-ups set for 10 and 11 years down the road. Now, why is that? Because we call up and we find out that they're not eligible for 10 years. but they've got a $500,000 today. And I go, well, $500,000 today, 10 years from now, it could be $2 million. I want that $2 million. And because I am eternal, I don't mind waiting. Right? So I just say to my assistant, put it into the calendar. And then 9 years and 364 days from now, she's going to say to me, by the way, tomorrow they turn 59 and a half. I'm going to go, oh, that's awesome. Okay? Now, when I say I do that a lot, I do that every single month, at least once a month at this point. Okay? So it's just, I don't have to leave my house. It's just set up. It's just so easy. It's there for all of you. It's already in there. So let's go back to federal employees. So nobody's 59 and a half. They have TSP, but they can't do it either because in this world, I've just said that they're not 59 and a half yet. So how do you make money? Well, first thing is because every federal employee has access to this at 59 and a half, I would call every client that's a federal employee and ask them to introduce me to people that are coworkers that are 59 and a half or older. Isn't that really simple?
Yes.
Most people that are 59 and a half and older and work in the government did not start 2 years ago. Most people have been there 20 and 30 and 40 years, which means their balances are fairly significant. $200, $300, $400, $500, $600,000. It's just so unbelievably simple. What's another great thing about working in there? Federal employees have access to something called FEGLI. Raise your hands if you're familiar with FEGLI. Okay, not enough of us. FEGLI is Federal Employee Government Life Insurance. Federal Employee Government Life Insurance is group life insurance that the government employees have access to. It goes up on the zeros and fives when you're 30, 35, 40, 45. So every 5 years it goes up. Most people started when they were 30. And they were paying $8 a pay, $7 a pay, $4, $11, whatever. I meet them when they're 60, and I say, hey, you're paying $176 per pay, twice every other week, for life insurance. And they go, really? Because there's so many things that are on this pay stub. Nobody looks at it. And how do you boil a frog? 1 degree at a time. How did they go from $7 to $176? Every 5 years, just over years, they never even really notice it. I sit down and I go, well, that's 26 times a year that you're paying $176. You realize you're paying over $4,000 a year? And they go, really? Now, here's the great thing about FEGLI. By the way, I think it's through MetLife. The price sucks. You can always beat FEGLI. If all you wanted to do is sell life insurance, just camp out near a government place and just say to people, hey, I can save you some money on life. No, I'm not joking. Like, it is so simple to make money. It is so simple to help people, to save them money, to provide great value for them. This is just simple stuff. You can get your foot in the door doing things like that, right? Here's another thing. You can look for things that are wrong in the people's current allocation. So you're going through the assets under management. What's an example of things that are wrong in allocations? Well, somebody's 60 and 100% of their money's in stock mutual funds. Now, when they were set up when they were 40, that was probably appropriate. But now it's never been changed, so it's too aggressive. Here's another example. Somebody's 50, 100% of their money's sitting in bonds or in a money market. Here's another example. Person has $166.66 a month, PAC, into their Roth IRA. Why do they have that? Because it used to be $2,000 a year was the limit. So we set it up at $166, never thought about it ever again. Now the limit is $6,000 or $7,000 if you're over 50 or above. So now you could raise it from $166 to $583.33. Now you might say, yeah, but Howard, that's not big money. It isn't. But it is just simple money. There's nothing wrong with calling somebody up and saying, hey, by the way, yesterday I was on the phone with somebody and they were doing $541 a month because that's $6,500 a year. And I said, by the way, this year it went up to $7,000. Would you like to change it? And they said, yeah. I said, great, I'll have my assistant call you. And that was it. And then my assistant calls and does a thing and they'll change it from the $541 to the $583. That's just good for them. It's an extra $500. That's fine. So I make $10 for doing that, $7. But it's every year, right? But the big thing is I get the brownie points. Nobody else was going to point that out to them. So you look at things. Sometimes you see somebody that's got a $40,000 money market account, and they're doing $50 a month in a Roth. And you can say to them, listen, if you're not going to use this money, if this isn't money that you need soon, why don't we move some money into a Roth and max it out and get it into something that's tax-free forever? There's so many different ways. I promise you, if you look at your assets under management and don't think about it as you set it up, Imagine it's a competitor that set it up. And you say, would I make this recommendation today? Here's another way to think about it. Isn't it reasonable to assume that when somebody makes an investment, that over the course of their life, 1 out of every 10 years, something needs to be changed? The allocation, they're older, the market's aggressive, this, that, there's other investments that are available, different products, whatever. Just 1 out of every 10 years. All right, you got 100 clients. That means every year 10 clients should be making some type of change. You have 1,000 clients. It means 100 clients every year should be making a change. You have 3,000 clients. 300 clients a year. You all see where I'm going with this? There's always business. There's always stuff. Listen, there was a time when living benefits with variable annuities did not exist in our world. Then suddenly it did. So all of a sudden we went back to people and said, hey, there's these living benefits. There was a time that fixed indexed annuities did not exist in our world, and all of a sudden it did, where we could go back to clients and say, look, if you don't want any risk at all, here's something where the principal's guaranteed, right? There was a time where the buffer annuities, which is kind of the generic name for AXA Structured Capital Strategy and Bright House Shield, when they didn't exist in our world. The companies, we didn't have managed accounts. We didn't have things that were tax efficient, municipals, whatever. Just look at it through a different set of eyes and you're going to see that there's changes that can be made, that should be made to benefit the client, that can be huge for them. You all get that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on. Another thing is you use it as an opportunity to discuss changes, right, that are helpful to them to get the appointment. So let's say you're calling somebody, you haven't talked to them for 10 years. And you say, how do I do this, man? This is kind of embarrassing. I've never called a client. I'll tell you a quick funny story. A couple of years ago, I'm in the home office and we were working on something, and somebody came in and said, hey, Howard, would you be willing to jump on the phone? Charles Whitener is on the phone, and he needs some help with some client things. And I said, sure. Now, I had never spoke to Charles in my life at this point. Okay, I know who Charles is. He made $1 million a year in business. He's got a great business. But I've never even said hello to the guy in my life. We jump on the phone, we start talking, and I said to him, you should have some follow-up with your clients. And he just starts laughing. He goes, Howard, I've been in the business 34 years. He goes, I've never talked to one client ever after I did business with them. Because I don't even know what I'd say to them. So this is what I said. I said, I went, I'm going to show you another page. So I went through, here's exactly what you say to the person. And then after you say that, which I'm going to cover in a bit, then you want to say, let me give you a couple ideas on things that might be beneficial. Anything. Hey, you're 60. We should probably scooch down your risk just a little. We should probably make a change, from the money market over there. We should probably increase your PAC into your Roth because we can get more money tax-free for you, set up tax-free. You want to use just 1 or 2 simple ideas to then be able to say, let me pop by. Because I promise you, the money that you have under management with them is probably 25 to 50% of what they actually have, if they've been with you for 5 years or longer. There's all this money outside. It almost feels like they're cheating on you. It's unbelievable. Let me tell you something, and some of you know this is true. Many of us have been around for a long time, so we do end-of-term calls, right? Somebody's had it for 20 years, we call up end of term, and the person has whole life insurance. Has that ever happened to anybody? Of course it has. And you go, how'd you wind up with whole life? I sold you term in 1998. I did the whole killing whole life, killing cash value, invest the difference, did this whole thing, and then you say to me, oh yeah, 13 years ago we bought some cash value policies, and you just feel dirty. You're like, how could you cheat on? How could you do that to me, right? The same thing happens with investments. You go, I've got every penny they have is with me. Then you call them up 5 years later and you find out you don't have every penny. You think you did. But you don't. They inherited money, they changed jobs, they got married, there's whatever. There's other things that came up and suddenly there's 20,000, 100,000, 200,000. It's things that you have to be able to follow up on, right? So there's so many opportunities. Okay, so let's talk about calling for the appointment, okay? So Charles says to me, I wouldn't even know what to say. So I said this to Charles, I said, imagine you had 1,000 clients, and every 90 days for the last 20 years, just methodically, like a machine, you called every single client. You never missed once. For 20 years, 1,000 people. And one day you looked under your desk and you saw an index card with a person's name and you went, oh my God, I missed them. How in the world did that happen? I missed this one person. I said, wouldn't you call that person up immediately and go, I am so sorry. I call all my clients every 90 days. I have for years and years, and yet somehow we just realized you fell through the cracks. I am so embarrassed, but I promise, now that I know this, this will never happen again. And what will the client say? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I never heard from anybody. I was wondering. I didn't even know if you were still in business, but I'm so glad that you called and told me that. So I said to Charles, I said, that's what I want you to say to every single client. You call every client and act like they're the only one this has ever happened to. And every client will react the exact same way. They will forgive you. And then it's done, and you never have to do it ever again. And by the way, you can have your assistant call and have the exact same conversation. Gee, Howard's so wonderful. He always calls, follows up, whatever. We just realized for whatever reason, we missed you, and boy, Howard's really embarrassed about that. He asked me to call you personally to give you our contact info. Just let you know from today forward, you can expect better every 90 days. That's how you start when you say, how do I start? You all got that?
Yeah.
Simple?
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's move on. How do you get good referrals? How do you get into the right market? Okay? I am constantly trying to upgrade my referrals. I am constantly trying to get into a better market. I want to make more money in less time.
Right.
Okay? So I am not interested in working twice as many hours to make twice as much money. But I do want to make twice as much money. So how do you do it? You have to control the point of contact. So what do I mean by that? Number one, you have to decide what market you want to be in. The problem that most people have with referrals is they do this. They say to the client, give me some names and numbers. My experience has been that people tend to refer down. Have you ever hired a new person who's 30 and they prospect in a mall? Do they talk to the 40-year-old in a business suit? No. Who do they talk to? The 18-year-old kid working behind the counter at the ice cream store, right? Because they are recruiting down because that's what they're more comfortable with. So my experience has been that if I talk to people and just say, just introduce me to people, they tend to introduce me to young people that are broke. And they say, boy, it would be great if you talked to my niece. She doesn't have a pot to pee in, but if it's and she's got $100,000 of student loans, but if you talk to her, I'm sure you can get her maybe saving $25 a month, maybe, or even if she doesn't save anything, at least you'll have educated her. Well, that's great. I'm glad that I'm a nonprofit. Okay? If I want to do charity work, I'll do charity work outside of Primerica, right? I donate a lot of money, but in Primerica, I want to help people, and it's got to be fair for both of us. You know, the Primerica symbol is the three rings. It's got to be good for the client, good for the company, good for us, right? Everybody's supposed to win. We're not supposed to be dying while everybody else is winning, right? So I found that unless I ask the client to introduce me to somebody specifically, I don't get great referrals. So on the first visit, the first interview, I am trolling for who I want to be introduced to. So if I'm talking to Tony and Shelley, I might say to Tony and Shelley, Tony, tell me, are your parents still alive? So let's say he says yes. And I say, it's wonderful. Tell me, do you ever think there'll be a time that you'll be financially responsible for them? Now, why am I asking that question? Tony thinks I'm asking because I'm concerned that Tony will have this big financial obligation down the road. I am really asking because I'm trying to say tactfully, do your parents have money? If Tony says, no, I'm fine. No, my parents are fine. I do not have to worry about my parents. I go, woof, that's good. At least we don't have to worry about that. And in my head, I go, Howard, you got to remember at the end, you're going to say to them, by the way, I'd love to meet your parents. If I'm in a neighborhood and I'm at Tony and Shelley's house and I go, this is a beautiful neighborhood. I would love to work in this area. then I'm going to say to Tony and Shelley, tell me, how are your neighbors around you? Is everybody friendly? Are they close? Do people know each other? If they have kids, I might say, are the kids play with other kids? Are the parents nice? If they say we don't talk to anybody, then I'm done. If they say, oh yeah, we have block parties, we do this, we do that, I go, great. At the end, I'm going to say to them, here's who I'd like you to introduce me to. Introduce me to your neighbors, right? If I wanted to open an office an hour from where I was standing, I'd say to somebody, by the way, I'm looking to open an office in New Brunswick. Who do you know out in the New Brunswick area? If I want to work with federal employees, you can say, by the way, who do you know that's a federal employee? If I want to work, do you follow what I'm saying? Whatever the market, just tell them who to introduce you to. I like working with people that are 55 to 85. Why? Because Willie Sutton was a famous bank robber, and they said to Willie Sutton, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. So why do I work with 55 to 85-year-old people? Because that's where the money is. A rich 25-year-old has $5,000. A broke 60-year-old has $100,000. I'd rather work with a broke 60-year-old than a rich 25-year-old. Now, by the way, 25-year-old, perfect market to be recruiting. So I'm not suggesting that you never talk to them. I'm just saying decide what you want. If that's what you want, then go for that. But if we're talking about generating business, then the business is in the older markets. If you want to recruit, then look for recent grads, newly married, married homeowners, kids, business owners. I sit with a client once some years ago. I say to the husband, I said, so what do you do for a living? He goes, oh, I work for my brother-in-law. I said, oh, tell me about that. So he starts describing the business. And I said, how many people work there? And he goes, 14. And a great business, though. He's doing fabulous. And I said, that's wonderful. At the very end of the conversation, we're done the interview, I said to him, by the way, I'd love to have a chance to talk to your brother-in-law. Tell me, you have enough credibility that if you asked your brother-in-law to take a 5-minute conversation, or have a 5-minute conversation with me, he would, don't you? And he went, sure. So he introduced me to the brother-in-law. I called brother-in-law up. Brother-in-law says to me within 2 seconds, I have $5 million sitting in CDs getting 1%. If you can show me a guaranteed investment that pays higher than 1%, you're in. Tell me, what do you got? Now, by the way, and also has to be federally insured, okay? FDIC insured, okay? Now, this is back in 2008. The whole world's coming to a, right? Everything's dropping in the big mortgage banking crisis. That's all he wanted. Do we have anything that meets that criteria?
Yes.
No. Not back in 2008. Now we have fixed index annuity. Back then we did. So I said to him, you know, before we get into products or anything like that, I'd really just like to have an opportunity. We'll sit down, we'll talk, I get a better sense of things, and then I can just provide you my thoughts in writing through a financial needs analysis. And he says, no, I really don't think, I don't want to waste your time. I take 7, 8 no's. I wear them out. Finally, he goes, okay. Now, by the way, most people couldn't give a crap if they say no. Okay? Just don't care. I got plenty of referrals, plenty of people. That's not an issue. Okay, this guy, I went, as soon as he said $5 million, I said, you had me at hello, okay? You got my attention on that one, okay? So, I take my 6, 7, 8 no's, whatever it is, I get into it. I walk through the door. It's 2 hours away. I walk through the door. They have a spread waiting for me. Food, everything, and the guy says, listen, we feel so bad because as you were driving up, we realized we're not going to move the money. We just want to leave it at the bank. And we feel terrible, but we want you to take some lunch meat home, make like a whole thing, feed your family, your wife, but we just feel, we know what to drive for you, we feel terrible. And I said, no, that's fine, it's fine. I'd love to learn about your business anyway. Let's just sit down and chat for a little bit. We start chatting, and I said, it's just such a fascinating business. Why don't I do this? I have a couple ideas that are kind of percolating in my head. Let me just put my thoughts in writing. I'll provide you the analysis, come back next week. Just give it, it's just great getting to know you. So they go, okay. I'm driving back the next week. My phone rings. I'm 45 minutes from their house. And the guy goes, listen, we just feel terrible because we talked. We're not doing business with you. You're a great guy. We love you. We think you're fabulous, but we're not doing business with you. Please just turn around. So I say to him, I'm practically there. Now I'm still 45 minutes away. I go, I'm practically there. And I just wanted to hand it to you. Otherwise I got to mail it to you, but I did all this work. Let me just show you the analysis, okay? We didn't do anything. And he goes, okay. I can hear like the in his voice. I walk through the door. Once again, they have a spread. They obviously immediately ran out to the store, bought a bunch of stuff. I sit down, we start talking, and they're like, we're not going to do any business, we're not going to do business, we're not going to do any business, right? So I start to explain to them that when you go to retire, that one of the important issues is going to be income. Later on, I will show you how to position this conversation. So we start talking about income. So I said, there is a program out there that has a guarantee. The guarantee is based on income. So I start to explain back then the Met PE4 product, right? He goes like this. Now, he's got the $5 million in CDs. He goes like this. He goes, all right, listen. I have a small IRA with Vanguard. It's got $79,000. I'll give you that. And it was obvious he just wanted to get rid of me. I go, great. I'm happy to start the relationship just working on this. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So we do the $79,000. Every 90 days I call. 9 months later, he calls me up. He goes, Howard, you're the first person that we've ever met who actually does what he says he's going to do. By the way, I'm not making the calls. My assistant is. Usually the first person we ever actually does what he says he's going to do. He goes, we're ready to let you in financially. I said, well, that sounds exciting. Exactly what does that mean? And he goes, we want to move, a bunch of money over with you. He goes, we want you to handle the $5 million. So I go, all right, well, let me put something together. So we get together, and I said to him, I don't want to handle the $5 million. I'll take $3 million. I said, now that I understand how you think, tomorrow you could turn around and say, I need $1.5 million or something. So, but I'll handle the $3 million. So we moved the $3 million over. We put it into PE4. Right? I get the biggest check of my life at the time. It was like $78,000 or something like that. Right? First time I broke $100,000 of income for a month. So I was just absolutely thrilled. So every 90 days, following up. 3 years later, he says, hey, we're selling our business, and we've got $5 million to invest. Well, over the years, I've invested about $12,000, $13,000 for these clients. I've been paid, including trails, about $500,000, not counting the great referrals that I got. Because we learned one question to an average and ordinary house, which is, you have enough credibility with your brother-in-law that if you asked him to take a 5-minute call from me, he would, don't you? Now, maybe that's leading the witness, but I can tell you, I've been paid millions of dollars on that question. Okay? I use that a lot. I am always looking for who I want to meet. So I sit down, I get a referral. Actually, this rolled up to me. It was somebody who used to be in the business who left the business. The account rolls up to me. We do our calls. I wind up sitting with the client. He's got a relatively small amount of money. We work with him. He loves me. We do the 90-day calls. This is over the course of a few years. He introduces me to a coworker of his. The coworker's wife, her 3 brothers own the company. The father died, left it to the 3 boys. The girls got some other things, but their 3 sons run the business. So I immediately say, get me in with the 3 brothers, right? I want to move up in market. The guy tries, he can't get me in. The wife tries, she can't get me in with her brothers. So over the course of 2 years, every time I'm talking to them, hey, by the way, have you talked to so-and-so? Yeah, I'd love to get a chance. I'm just very casual. And they go, it's just not going to happen. So I just keep bringing it up casually. So 2 months ago, I get a call out of the blue. Hey, one of my brothers wants to meet with you. Well, no, duh. Of course he does, because I'm eternal. I wear everybody out. That's why I'm married. Because I just don't care if you say no to me. I have an expression I live by, okay? Which is, I agree with everything somebody tells me, and then I get them to do it my way anyway. Okay? So it doesn't matter. Client goes, I'm not doing this. I go, of course not. Let's just take a quick little break here and talk things through, okay? It doesn't matter what somebody says, okay? As long as you don't take it personal, it's unbelievable what you can accomplish. And it is incredible how many times people go, oh, I never thought I'd wind up doing this, but this is so good. I'm so glad that you were persistent with it and talked this through. I didn't realize that, boy. So I've done this for years and years and years, and it's unbelievable how many people now are able to retire that wouldn't have if I had followed their plan as opposed to them following my plan, right? So he says, hey, I can get you into one of the brothers. So I go to see one of the brothers. So what do I do with one of the brothers? I wind up doing $2.4 million in a buffer annuity. I wind up doing $1 million in a mutual fund. I wind up doing $370,000, 3 accounts for the children that are in their 20s. So that's another $1.1 million. So it's like $4.5 million. Then I say to him, by the way, who handles the 401k at work? He goes, well, I make all those decisions. Well, how are you doing? There's $10 million to the 401k. So next week, we're going to sit down and talk about his 401k. And I am, inch by inch, I'm getting leverage to get to the 2 brothers. I've never forgotten that. Look, they have no choice Okay, they don't realize they're in a contest with me, right? But I do. So I will get to them eventually. By the way, the client that moved the $4.5 million with me is worth $50 million. Okay? So that was the small money. Everybody gets all like, that's why I got paid $80,000 yesterday, right? So people turn around and they go, oh my God, that's just so unbelievable. Oh, I'm playing the long game on this one. By the way, as I was going through this, the wife casually mentions, because I was destroying an investment they have, I was tearing it apart, showing how they were getting ripped off. She goes, I think that's what so-and-so has. And then the husband goes, he's worth $200 million, it won't matter to him. And I'm going, I logged that in my brain. Will not ever forget that. That may come around 17 years from now, but that's like Haley's Comet, okay? Eventually there'll be a moment, and then boom, I'm getting in on that, right? You choose the market that you want to work in. It is as simple as that. Okay? You have to tell them who you want to be introduced to. Parents are fabulous. Aunts and uncles are fabulous, right? Siblings, coworkers, that type of thing. Okay, we talked about federal employee, we talked about that, let's go on. Okay, initial interview. The details matter. What I find is most people don't ask enough follow-up questions. So let me give you an example. Person says to you, you go, how much do you have in checking, savings, money? And they go, I got $100,000 in a money market. You know what most people do? They go, okay, they put it down, and then in the F&A they put 100,000. But shouldn't you be curious? Shouldn't you say, where'd the money come from? Now they might say, oh, it's extra money in my budget, I have a $2,000 extra we saved, we've done this for years. Well, that would be good for you to know that, wouldn't it? How about if they said to you, well, we have 100,000 because we've been saving for a house, we're planning on buying a house next month. Well, that's a totally different conversation, isn't it? How about if they say, it's an inheritance? Well, I can tell you, a number of times I've had this conversation. So I say to them, really an inheritance, tell me, is there any other money that you're going to be inheriting? Oh yeah, within a year we'll get another $500,000. Well, that's good that I know now. Better question, are you the only one that inherited money, or are there others? Oh no, I have 3 brothers and sisters, they all inherited the same thing. Interesting. I think at the end of the conversation I'm going to say to you, hey, I'd love to meet your brothers and sisters, you have enough credibility if you ask them to take a call, right? So it's just always down that path. So everybody is so concerned about doing the business, where in my mind I'm always thinking to myself, now I got to be thinking about the future. I need those referrals, right? Okay. So maybe they change jobs. Yeah, I just changed jobs last month. Really, why'd you change jobs? Well, they laid off everybody in the department. Well, now I know that I'd like to get referrals to everybody in that department, right? On the other hand, you might just say, like in a good economy right now, probably that's not the case. 10 years ago, that was the case, right? Okay, let's go on. Let's not worry about any of that. Okay, so you want to develop simple ways to be able to explain things. I'm going to give you I'll give you 3 examples. Number 1, bonds. Okay, typically when you're talking to people about investing money, at some point, stocks and bonds come up in conversation. People have a sense of what stocks are, but most people really don't have a sense of what a bond is. And so they'll turn around and they'll say things like this. Yeah, I think a bond is like a stock, but more conservative. I think a bond is something that pays interest, right? I think a bond is, it's guaranteed, right? It's guaranteed, it's through a bank, right? They really don't have any idea. So since that comes up, probably at least 1/3 of every appointment I do, I figured out how to explain it very simply. So you ready? Here's the story. So let's say I'm talking to Glenn and Z. I would turn around and I'd say this. I'd say, Glenn, Z, let me just give you a quick example of what a bond is. Imagine you have $10,000 and it's sitting in a bank account and you're getting 1%. I'm your neighbor, I live right down the road. And I need to borrow $10,000. So I go to the same bank and I say, hey, I need to borrow $10,000. And the bank says, no problem, we'll lend it to you at 10%. I go, 10%? That sounds high. Then I remember my good friends, Glenn and Z. And I knock on your door and I say, hey, listen, I know you've got $10,000 sitting at this bank. Don't ask me how. But I know you have $10,000 sitting at the bank at 1%. They want to charge me 10% to borrow it. How about if you just lend me the money? I'll give you 5. You'll make more, I'll pay less, everybody wins. We just cut out the bank. And then Glenn Z, you're probably going to look at me and say, how do we know you'll pay me back? And I say, don't worry, I will write you an IOU. That's all a bond is. But instead of it being a person, it's a company, corporate bonds, a government, or a municipality. That's really all it is. So there's government bonds, corporate bonds, municipal bonds. All it is an IOU. When somebody says I bought a bond, really what they did was they lent money. Oh, I bought a government bond. You lent the government money, right? I have an IBM bond. You lent IBM money. It's as simple as that. That's all it is. You're really not buying it, you're really lending it. And then you get a certificate, and the certificate says, we owe you the money back. We owe you $1,000 or $10,000 or $1 million. And we have to pay you back in 90 days or in 30 years or in 10 years, and here's the interest rate. It's just very straightforward and simple. You all get that?
Yes.
If you explain it that way, I promise you, almost every single time the client will say, wow, I never understood that. It's the first time I've ever understood that. Thank you so much. The Plumeri used to call that the value gap. The moment that you can explain things in a way that they get, complicated things in simple ways, they go, oh, I need to work with you. Second, mortgage interest. You'd be shocked how many times somebody will say, well, I can't pay off my mortgage because that's my only deduction I have. My accountant said, don't pay off the mortgage, I need the deduction. Now, maybe in 1 in a billion situation that makes sense, but the vast majority of times that's a stupid thing. So how do you handle it? Handle it this way. By the way, I had a conversation once with an accountant. He said that. I said what I'm about to tell you, and he looked at me, smiled, and went, yeah, you're right. All right, so this works 100% of the time. You ready? All right, so Glenn Z, let's play a game for a second. I knock on your door. I say to you, listen, for every dollar you give me, I'll give you 22 cents back. How many dollars do you want to give me? And they say, none. I say, well, that's what happens when you pay $1 of interest on your mortgage if you're in the 22% tax bracket. You pay $1 in interest, the government gives you 22 cents back. So listen, if you have to pay $1 in interest, it's better to get 22 cents back, isn't it? But wouldn't it be better not to pay the dollar? Right? And then they go, I get it. I get it. Simple. Risk. I can't tell you how many people I've invested money for that have said to me, I can't take risk. Can't take risk. Absolutely cannot take risk. You ever hear that before? Yeah. Okay, well here's the interesting thing. Okay? Client will say to me, I don't want to take risk. I don't want to lose any money. I go, I don't want you to lose any money either. We're on the same page. No part of my plan that has, hey, let's lose some money. So we're on the same page. I don't want to lose any money either. But then I say this, I say, but I want you to know, as your financial advisor, my definition of risk is much larger than yours is. So let me help you understand all the different risks that I have to be concerned about for you. Right. The first risk is called financial risk. That's what you're talking about. You put $100,000 away, it goes down to 90, you lost $10,000. That's a financial risk. That's a legitimate risk. That's what you're concerned about, isn't it? And they say, oh, absolutely. By the way, I'm going to talk fast because I got to move fast. So that's what you're talking about. And I understand that that's why you're concerned. That's a legitimate risk. We don't want that to happen. The second risk, though, is called an interest rate risk. Interest rate risk is, I'll give you a quick example. When I was a kid, everybody said, here's my plan. I want to save $1 million. When I retire, I'll have it in the bank. The bank will pay 6% interest. I'll make $60,000 a year in interest. $5,000 a month. I'll retire. I'll never even touch my principal. That was people's plans. And then people retired in 2009 with $1 million in the bank. And the bank paid 0.01% interest, which was $100 for the year. And they got $2 a week in interest from $1 million account. So what happened? They had to start withdrawing money, spending principal, didn't they? Right. So at the end of the year, instead of having $1 million, they'd say $950,000. They didn't lose money to a financial risk, but they still had a lot less money, didn't they? And the net effect is the same, isn't it? Absolutely. Third risk is called marketability. Marketability is can you get the money when you need it? So I'll give you an example. Sometimes people say to me, I've got real estate. It's the greatest investment in the world. I've got real estate. I don't need to worry about anything else. I have real estate. I've got $2 million worth of real estate. Good. Have an emergency tomorrow. Sell a property in the next 2 to 3 weeks and tell me if you got full value for it. Of course you didn't. The only way you can sell a property quickly that fast is it's got to be cash, and it's going to be somebody that's a shark that's going to come in and say 50 cents on the dollar or whatever. So you're going to lose massive money if there isn't the marketability aspect of it. Number 4, purchasing power, inflation. So people turn around and they say, well, you know, I have my $1 million and I'm getting 1%, but at least I'm not losing any money. Well, we are losing money. We're losing purchasing power. So here's an example. Let's say that your grandfather lent my grandfather $100 100 years ago. And all of a sudden I was going through some archives and I went, oh my God, my family never repaid this $100. I feel terrible. So I reach in my pocket, pull out a crisp 100, I go, there you go, we're even. Are we even? Of course not. The 100 that your family gave to my family would buy a car back then. The 100 I gave you bought a meal. Right? So when people say, ooh, at least I'm not losing money, well, if inflation is 2 or 3%, if the interest that you're making is taxable, then the reality of it is that unless you're making 3 to 4% per year, you're losing money. It doesn't look that way. The government acts like you're not because they're still taxing you. But you are losing money. So a person that goes, I've got the best pension in the world. I have a union pension, $5,000 a month. It's great. $5,000 a month might be great today. 10 years from now, it's not going to be 5. It's going to feel like 4. 10 years after that, it's going to start to feel like 3,000 or 2,500, isn't it? Right? So purchasing power, very important thing. And last thing is longevity risk. People tend to live a lot longer. Nowadays, in fact, every decade, life expectancy tends to go up a year to a year and a half a decade. So there's, you know all the statistics, a married couple age 62, 25% chance one of them lives to 97, 98 years old, right? So yeah, somebody can turn around and say, hey, I didn't risk any principal whatsoever. No financial risk. All the money is safe. Yeah, the problem is because it's not growing, you will run out of money.
Yeah.
You'll be 85 years old with 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 years left in your body, and you'll be completely broke, and you'll be able to say, never lost a penny in the market. The best thing you can do for your children, not become financially dependent on them. So that gives you an opportunity to say to them, no matter what we do, we will always have some degree of risk. The question is which ones are the most appropriate? So let me show you how to use these mutual funds to stack the odds in your favor. So we can talk about them as long-term investments, so they don't get caught up in the, I put 100,000 in and it went down to 80, because that was temporarily. We're looking long-term, right? So it gives you an opportunity to be able to create a good conversation with them. I'm going to show you two last things here in terms of selling that I think will be helpful for you. AXA came out with SCS, Structured Capital Strategies. Then Bright House came out with SHIELD. In my mind, they're the same. They are different. There are differences to it. But in terms of the process of explaining it, it's the exact same. It does not matter which one you have. Okay? It does not matter to me what you do. Now, in both examples, SCS and in SHIELD, they give you different choices of how you want to structure the investments and whatnot. I'm going to show you 100% of the time what I do. And I've done probably $15 million of that in under a year. Okay, I think I'm closing in on $30 million personal. So probably a half, maybe just over half of what I've done is in that area. Okay, you ready? Very, very simple. Take pictures because this is verbatim. You ready? Now, by the way, I'm going to skip the part where I explain who AXA is or Bright House is. So I want you to look at me for a second, because I'm going to show you, it's visual, okay? Mr. and Mrs. Client, I'm going to recommend to you for this $250,000 that we work with something called AXA's Structured Capital Strategies. And it's literally as simple as 1, 2, 3. Number 1, there are no fees. There are no fees, there are no fees, there's no fees. There's no fees in the beginning, there's no fees in the middle, there's no fees in the end. There are no fees. Now sometimes people say, well, how are they making money? Well, when we have a savings account at the bank and they pay us 1%, we don't say, where are the hidden fees? We understand the bank's using our money to make money for themselves. Same thing with AXA. They're using the money to make money for themselves, but they figured out a way to do it without having to charge us fees. I'm going to digress for a second. I did that multiple different ways, and every single time the client would at the end say, well, what are the fees? But I found if I said there are no fees, no fees, no fees, no fees, there are no fees in the beginning, no fees in the middle, no fees in the end, there are no fees. If I said it 8 or 10 times, they went, I get it, there are no fees. Okay. Now look at my hands. I do this to the client. Number 2, okay? It's a 5-year plan, so it's relatively short term. They take a picture of the S&P 500 the day the plan goes live, then you go to sleep for 5 years. And then they look at how the S&P 500 performed. It's either up or down. If it's up, you get 100% of the performance up to a maximum they call the cap rate. Currently, it's around 40%. Changes every day until the plan goes live, then it's locked in for 5 years. So an example, if the S&P goes up 30%, you get 30%. If it's up 50%, you get 40% because there's a maximum that you can make. Number 3, now this is what I call the secret sauce. What if Murphy's Law kicks in and the day we invest, everything turns to crap? And we say, just my luck, always happens to me. Well, guess what? AXA takes the first 20% of losses. If the S&P is down 18%, we lose nothing. AXA takes the loss. If the S&P is down 22%, we lose 2%. AXA loses 20%. Now, we won't be happy about being down 2%, but we'll definitely say, could have been worse. Everybody else lost 22%.
Wow.
Now, that's my presentation.
That's awesome.
That's it. I'm going to show you 2 more things in a second. That's it. I've sat and I've listened to the wholesalers. I've sat and listened to everybody. They talk and talk and talk, and it's diarrhea of the mouth. And what it reminds me of is those assistants I fired because they can't get to the point.
Yes.
Okay? Don't baffle them with bullshit. Just say, there's only 3 moving pieces. There's no fees. The market can go up, it can go down. Let's describe each one. We're done. Elvis has left the building. Now, at the very end, this is what I say. So there's 2 things I can guarantee you. Number 1, we'll dramatically reduce your fees because there are none. Number 2, we'll reduce your risk because AXA is essentially insuring you against the first 20% of losses. Got that?
Yep.
Now, you have to be clear on a few things. 1, you have to be clear with them that there's a 5-year surrender charge. They can take up to 10% per year without the surrender charge, but they should never do it because if they do, it changes the way the guarantee works. So I literally say to clients, I want you to understand something. You can take 10% per year, but if you do, it changes the guarantee. I have made a decision. This is what I say to the client. I will never invest a penny of my client's money if there's any possibility they'll need any of it within 5 years. Because then it turns it into the world of luck. Was it the good time or bad time to take the money? So the reason I'm recommending 250, not all 500, Mr. Client, is because if you have an emergency, we have access to the other 250. This 250, hands off. I want you to invest, go to sleep for 5 years, wake up, then we'll take a look. Make sense? That's it. Okay, so what's the difference between AXA and Bright House, okay? Now, what I use for AXA is I use the 5-year cap rate, the 20% downside protection. For Bright House, I would use the 6-year cap rate, 65%, 25% downside protection. Now, some of you are going to look at that and you're going to go, why wouldn't I use Bright House 100% of the time? Because 65% is better than 40 and 25% downside is better than 20%, right? And there's legitimacy to that. You might do it. But what you're forgetting is it's the 5 versus 6 years. And there are a degree of clients that would say 5 is fine because that's short term, 6 just feels a little longer. So there is no one size fits all. You've got to know your client and figure out what works best. Okay, next, I'm going to give you a simple fixed indexed annuity presentation. I promise you, if you memorize these 2 presentations, if you do what I said in terms of the way you follow up with clients and whatnot, 100,000 extra of income is nothing. Just nothing. Just nothing. Just the easiest thing in the world. All right, so now you ready? Now this is going to be super complicated. Okay? I'm going to use an example of AIG. Does not matter to me if you do AIG or Lincoln. Okay? Same thing to me. You decide what you think is best. I'm not taking a position on that. I'm using AIG only because one of their funding options is the S&P 500, where it's called point-to-point participation rate, where they say whatever the S&P 500 does over a year, the client gets 45%. So if the S&P is up 10%, they get 4.5. If it's up 20%, they get 9%. You all got that? Okay. So I'm just going to use that as the example. You can use whatever you want. Whatever you want. Just use this formula and just use it in a simple way. So let's see. Okay, you ready? Simple as 1, 2, 3. Now remember, this is going to be really complicated, so you've got to stick with this, okay? Okay, number 1, there are no fees, there are no fees, there are no fees. There's no fees in the beginning, there's no fees in the middle, there's no fees in the end. There are no fees. Now sometimes people say to me, how are they making money? Well, when we have a savings account at the bank, they pay 1%. We don't say where are the hidden fees. We understand the bank's using your money to make money for themselves. Same thing with AIG. They're using our money to make money for themselves, but they figured out a way to do it without having to charge us fees. Number 2, there's no risk. There's no risk because the money's not invested in the market. In fact, technically, it's not an investment. It's a savings plan. Number 3, they pay an interest rate that's determined annually based off how the stock market does. The way they determine it is super simple. They currently pay 45% of whatever the yearly increase in the S&P 500 is. So an example, if the S&P is up 10%, we get 4.5%. If the S&P is down 10%, we get 0 because the money is not, it should say not, is not invested in the market. Okay? Now, when you get almost half of the up and none of the down, you can actually wind up doing significantly better than you may realize. Let me show you a 30-year example. Now, by the way, you could close just on that. Do you see how simple that is? Okay? My appointments are simple. Simple. When I work with a client, many times I do 6 or 7 or 8 different accounts. I might do annuities, mutual funds, managed. I might have 4 different things that I'm doing, life insurance, whatever. So I figured out how to do each piece very simply so the client isn't overwhelmed, right? By the way, you do this. It is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Number 1, number 2. Number 3, why? There's a psychological reason. It is actually easier for somebody to receive the information when you are visually segmenting it for them. Okay? So, this is very tiny writing that I can't even read. This is the hypothetical from AIG. This is the hypo from AIG. And in the hypo, which you can't see, that was interesting. In the hypo from AIG, do I have a dot? Here we go. Okay, over here it shows how much the client invested. Okay, in this example, I think $250. And then, okay, thank you. And then over here, it shows there's something called a premium enhancement. A premium enhancement is a bonus. So AIG says, hey, if you're going to invest this way, we'll give you in Jersey, in Pennsylvania it's 2%, in Jersey it's 3%. So they say, we'll give you a 3% bonus. You put in 250, we give you 75 up front. Okay? That's an afterthought. It's nice, but it's actually an afterthought. If the client had a surrender charge they had to pay to move the money, that's nice. But that actually really isn't a big deal. But the 250 plus the 7,500, over here it'll say 257,000. Okay? The big issue is this. Right over here, this is the participation rate. It actually shows 45%. Okay? And then I show people that they're starting off with the 257,000. And then I show them, this is the 30-year, there'll be a second page, but the 30-year track record of the S&P 500. And I just pick out some examples. The first year where the S&P 500 did 12%, we made 5% or 6%, whatever that number is, right? I'll show another year where I go here, it was up 20-something%. We made 11% that year, right? Then I'll turn around and I'll show, I might point out some years where the market was down 20%. I'll say, look, you see how we got 0, right? So you make money, but you can't lose money in there. Well, in the end, the bottom column shows that the S&P 500 over 30 years has averaged like 9.6, 9.7%. Now we're getting, thank you, we're getting less than half. However, that's not working now. It's okay, you don't even have to worry about that. Here, I'm going to go back. That's okay, now you can make that larger again. Ooh, I like that. Okay. So you get 45%. 45% of 9.6 would actually work out to be somewhere in the 4s, like 4.2, 4.3, 4.4. But our client actually made 5.7. The client actually got like 60% of what the S&P 500 did. Now, how's that possible? Because they got almost half of the up, but none of the down. If you can get almost half of the up and none of the down, you do better than half. So for a client who goes, I don't want to take any risk. I don't want to take any risk. All I got to do is just do 3%, 4%. I'll be fine long term with that. What do you got? Well, we don't have anything other than this. CDs don't do that. Mutual funds don't do that. Variable annuities don't do that. This can do that. And so this whole presentation, you can squish that again, this whole presentation takes no more than 8 to 9 minutes in total. And in the end, you'll say, what questions do you have? They'll ask 1 or 2 questions, you'll answer it, and that's it. It's done. And when I sat with the person that I was just describing that I did $2.4 million in a buffer annuity, I went through exactly what you saw me do with AXA and Shield. And it took me 6 minutes, and he went, okay, great, we'll do that. What else? And I went, well, now we have to talk about XYZ. And then I talked about mutual funds. And because I can do math super fast in my head, I went, well, that was $76,000 that I just made. That was like just like this. Like most people think like, oh, you must have spent hours and hours and hours. It's just another zero at the end. Don't be intimidated by it, okay? If I was doing a presentation for 20 million, it's still the same presentation. Right? Okay. So, what do you have to explain on fixed indexed annuities? So, you're going to explain there's a 10-year surrender charge. You have to explain the max they can withdraw is 10% per year, okay? With no charge from AIG, but they will obviously pay taxes on the growth. And they should never be withdrawing money prior to 59.5. Even if AIG or Lincoln says, yes, you can withdraw, the IRS is going to say, and they'll wind up paying a 10% penalty, right? So if you're investing the money for somebody that's 50, don't be saying to them, oh, you can take 10% a year out, okay? Because they'll get burned on that, okay? All right, so how do you position annuities with living benefits? Very simple. I came up with this conversation years ago, and it's probably the easiest way to explain why somebody needs living benefits. And that's this. I've worked with hundreds of clients that have retired. I've seen people do it the good way, the bad way, and everything in between. And what I found over the years is that there's basically 3 simple steps that a client needs to have a stress-free retirement. And if you do these 3 things, financially, you should have a worry-free retirement. So number 1, the first thing is that you want to be debt-free. You want to lower your mandatory overhead, right? That's why we want somebody to have no car payment, no credit card debt, no mortgage, whatever, right? You want to go with as low mandatory overhead as possible, okay? Number 2, you need income. Income is Social Security, pension, investment income. In a perfect world, that covers all the normal monthly expenses. So just like for the last 40 years of their life, they figured out how to live on whatever their paycheck was, right? Even if they didn't have a formal budget. It's the same thing in retirement. We need to make sure they have enough income coming in to handle their normal expenses. So you can ask right at that point, is Social Security and pensions, will they fully cover your current and future monthly expenses? And most people will say, no, then we need to develop a plan to address that. I feel like dropping the mic. But isn't that incredibly simple? That's it. Like, people, oh my gosh, how do I do this? It's just common sense. There's 3 things you need. 1, you want to be debt-free. 2, you need income, okay? Number 3 is you need access to money, access to lump sum money that doesn't affect your income payments. So you need it for fun and emergencies, vacations, car, roof replacement, spoiling the grandchildren, health issues. So what we need to do is we need to look at the typical person's money and divide it and say how much of this is going to be used to create an income so they can have a worry-free retirement, and how much of this is left over here so that at any time they want, they can withdraw money for fun things and emergencies. They might have $300,000 in mutual funds with us. They might not touch it for years. And then out of the blue, they might say, I need $17,000. Then 3 months later, they might need $20,000. Then they might not touch it again for years. That's very different than an annuity with living benefits that's paying an income. You follow me? But if you mention it this way, if you position it this way, everything else becomes incredibly simple. So debt-free income, access to money, that's basically it. I'm going to wrap up on 2 quick things here. This is a letter that Warren Buffett wrote to his shareholders in Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett, third wealthiest man in the world behind Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, considered the greatest investor alive today, worth around $80 billion or so. And this is what he wrote. No advisor, economist, or TV commentator, and definitely not Charlie nor I, can tell you when chaos will occur. Market forecasters will fill your ear, but will never fill your wallet. Now, why do I want to show that to you? Because many, many times, people will start to think that they're smarter than they are. They will hear something on TV and they'll say, well, you know, there's going to be a recession soon. Well, why? Well, because CNBC's talking about it. Well, what the hell does CNBC know? Well, they've got super smart people. I don't think any smarter than Warren Buffett. His business partner is Charlie Munger. Well, you know, I read an article online, and they said that now's a good time to get involved in this or that. Well, what do they know? Well, they've got a lot of things at the end of their name. It doesn't mean anything. Nobody knows. Nobody. Nobody, nobody, nobody. It's like breaking a pane of glass and trying to predict where the glass falls. I really want you to understand that. Nobody knows. Clients will say stupid stuff. They'll be like, well, I don't think now's a good time to invest because there's a recession coming. Well, why is there a recession coming? Well, because the market's at all-time highs and it's been 10 years and, you know, there's got to be a recession soon because, you know, 10 years, really, Australia had 25 years of uninterrupted growth. Where's the rule that says after 10 years there has to be a recession? I'm not saying there's not going to be, but there's no rule. It's not the way it works. Do you know that if you flip a coin, you've got a 50-50 chance of heads or tails? Do you know if you flip a coin 9 times in a row and it lands on heads, what are the odds the next time you flip it, it lands on heads? 50-50. Still 50-50. The past has no impact on it. So the fact that the market's gone up for 10 years has no impact on today or tomorrow. Nobody realizes that emotionally. They feel like it has to be. When the market was going down in 2008, 2009, oh, it's going to keep going worse. Why? Because that's what everybody's predicting. They don't know anything. They're idiots. Okay? Listen, you can have great money managers that say long-term we see trends. We think these companies are really well run. That's very different than being able to predict what happens today or tomorrow or a week from now or a year from now in the market. It's impossible. So I have this hanging in my office in my house. And sometimes I'll have clients that'll call me, like when the market's going crazy, and they'll say something, and I'll say, it's so funny you say that. Let me read to you something I have hanging on my wall. And then I'll say, this is the greatest business mind, the greatest investor alive today on the face of the earth. Stop listening to people on TV. Just stop. Okay? The only thing that matters is 10 years from now, you're going to be happy you made this investment. Go to sleep for 10 years. Stop looking at stuff. Okay? That's the way that you want to think. And the last message that I have for all of you, and if you still want to do Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do Q&A, but the last message I have for you is this, which is it's never too late to reinvent yourself. And when I say reinvent yourself, I do not mean as a securities guru or as an investment expert or anything like that. But you need to look in the mirror and say, what is it that I want? What do I want my business to look like? And even if yesterday your business didn't look that way, even if yesterday you weren't strong in a specific area, it doesn't mean that tomorrow you can't be. It's never too late, you're never too old. You just have to get focused on it and make the decision. So if you decide, hey, I'd love to hit $500,000 of income before the convention, or 400,000 or 250, or wear the ring, or get promoted, or something like that, you've got to pull back strategically, and you've got to work on your business, not just in your business, and you've got to say, what are the pieces I need to move to be able to make that happen? And you can. It's just like this. It's just changing your perspective on things, and everything else will change for you, I promise you. Okay, we'll open it up to some Q&A.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a couple. Grab a seat, guys. Thanks. Hey, and that was with a headache. Imagine if you didn't have a headache. Imagine if you took aspirin. Holy shit, right? Before we ask any questions, what I don't want is, hey, I have a client who's got 6,000. What fund should I put him in? Okay. No stupid questions, okay? But he showed you, because there's a huge variety of investment options we have, 1,100 different opportunities to invest in mutual funds, right? But there's a systematic, like you said, 100% of the time, this is what I show clients, when they're in that need. But some of us are sitting down with people that are 35 and they've got $8,000 to their name. He's not putting them in this. You with me? So he showed you Bright House, he showed you AXA, showed you AIG. What family of funds or funds that you sit down with a person, what are you most comfortable? Where's 90% of your mutual funds invested for clients?
American funds.
American funds.
Yeah.
And why?
Well, first, let me just say, the negative to American funds is that they're not platform. So it's just a pain in the ass. So because I have good administrative help, I don't care it's a pain in the ass because it's somebody else's ass that has the pain. But it is a pain in the ass, right? But the positive to American funds is American funds has very low expense ratios. So when you're in a world where everybody's moving into index funds, and index funds have really low internal fees, it's far more competitive to be able to say, hey, I'm at 0.6% a year fees instead of 1% fees. Okay, it's just that's an easier thing. Additionally, American Fund's been around since 1934. They have great long-term performance, great long-term track records. Their marketing materials are unbelievable. Their administrative follow-up and help is incredible. It is very simple for me to beat an index fund. When somebody says I have Vanguard 500, I have a presentation for how to beat Vanguard 500. I say it the same way every single time, boom, boom, boom. I met with a wholesaler once with another company and I said, show me how you beat Vanguard 500. And he talked for like 20 minutes or whatever and I said, now let me show you what I do when I have American funds. And 4 minutes later he went, okay, well maybe there's a different area that we could work together on. So for me, I just win every single time when I'm with them.
Okay, so in that scenario,
yes.
You said when he shows the fixed annuities, shows the index annuities, shows the variable annuity, or shows an annuity, you say there's no fees, there's no fees, there's no fees.
Yes.
So in your 1, 2, 3 presentation, how would you, for some of these guys who just got their securities license yesterday, what is your 1, 2, 3 presentation on what is a mutual fund? What do you use? A flip chart, you write it out?
Okay. Here's what I'm glad you said that, because almost every time when I talk to somebody, it doesn't matter if they have $250,000 in a 401k or if they've got $2,000 in a mutual fund, most people still don't really fully understand what a mutual fund is. So here's what Mr. and Mrs. Client, before we get started, let me just make sure we're on the same page. Let me just kind of explain to you what a mutual fund is. A mutual fund is a professional money management company. You can give them $50, $50,000, $50 million. They take your money, they put it into a big pot along with thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of other people. Small mutual fund could have $1 billion. Large mutual funds could have $100 billion or more, massive. And then they have full-time professional money managers that live, sleep, and eat managing this money, trying to grow it. In fact, great money managers can get paid over $1 million a year in bonus. And that's one of the reasons that almost any company that you work for that has a 401k, 403b, ultimately the choices almost always filter down to a mutual fund because it's been proven long-term the best way to be able to grow and accumulate wealth. Now, mutual funds are great long-term investments, but they're lousy short-term investments. And the reason it's a lousy short-term investment, I take a piece of paper and I draw this, a thing going up and down, up. And I say it's almost like watching somebody play with a yo-yo walking up the steps. So if you invested here and you needed the money 6 months later, you could be very upset and say, boy, I lost a bunch of money. But if you're leaving it long-term, the ups and downs don't matter, you'll do really well with it. So if we're going to talk mutual funds, we have to understand the place that mutual funds hold, which is for our long-term investments. That's it.
Awesome.
Awesome.
One other question. You said if it's not more than 5, if it's money that's not long-term, 5-year long-term is 5 years, 5 years, 7 years.
Yeah.
Sit down with a guy like me. I'm a plumber. I make $70,000 a year. I want to set up some investments, but I've got some money I want to put aside for the next 3 years. What do you say to that client, Howard?
Put it in the money market. I won't touch that money. I know a lot of people that do.
You'll do the money market for him, or you?
Yeah, I'll open up the money market for them. Because potentially never moves it out of the money market, and then years later I can get it. And I know people that say, well, we can put it in a municipal bond fund, and we can do short-term this, short-term that. All of those things create income for us, but creates a fee for the client and potential risk for the client. And if it goes down and the client paid you, and they lost money, you could have somebody that's upset. So for me, I just don't touch it. 5 years or longer, anything less than that, I just don't touch.
The last 100 investments you did, how many were bond funds?
Normally when I'm using mutual funds, because I'm working with older people, there's I don't do one fund. If I was dealing with somebody who's 25 who had $1,000. But if you're dealing with somebody who's got 50, 100, $1 million, I might deal with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 funds, something like that. So a typical example would be 25%, 30% is on the bond side.
The reason I ask,
with somebody older.
yeah, the reason I ask is, do you buy into the concept, like Nick Murray talks about, how you gotta have more equity in your portfolio than you really think you do based upon the risks that you talked about?
I agree with that.
Got it.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that, especially in today's world because interest rates are so low with bonds. So if we wake up 5 years from now and interest rates are high and bonds are paying 8%, totally different.
Gotcha.
You know?
And in reference to managed accounts, a lot of people when managed accounts first came out, they didn't touch them.
Yeah.
And then there's been some changes in it, and a lot more people got involved in managed accounts. Some people got involved because they can make a lot of money.
Right.
And then some people got involved in managed accounts because they say, I know if I make the same money, I know it's a better investment for a client.
Yeah.
Where do you use or target managed accounts?
About 12% of my money is in managed. So I have like 130 whatever million personal and probably 16 millions in managed. So sorry about that. So about 16 million I have in managed accounts right now. About 130 something, 5 million, something like that personal. So where I use managed, where I've come down is I don't use managed accounts for people that are younger. I don't think the fees justify it. Where I see managed coming into play is when you're dealing with older clients. You define what older is, but older clients who want to be more conservative, that want growth, but they want to manage the downside risk. Maybe we're sitting there saying we can't put anything more into an annuity because we're already maxed out. Maybe they need to limit the liquidity of a managed account. And so that's where I think it comes into. So I have managed accounts that I work with, but by no means do I think I'm the expert of all experts when it comes to the managed.
But you like managed accounts
Yes,
for a percentage of your
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
We have time for one question.
Yes, the old white guy over there?
The old white guy.
Yes.
And this is for the old people in the room, okay? First of all, thank you. This is priceless. And for those of you that have been around for a short time, do what he said, because I did not. And so my question for you, Howard, is this, because I've heard this before, and I've tried to do this, and I have challenges, because all my clients came in 93, 94, 95, and 96.
Yeah.
Before cell phones were invented. And the only telephone numbers I have are home telephone numbers.
Right. Okay, so you're having problems reaching
And so
people.
Can
you repeat that question when he's done too? Because they can't hear me back.
And so what I have done over the last few years trying to fix that is I send birthday cards to everybody with a little note in there, please update me with your contact information. I send out the quarterly newsletters that the company has with my picture on the whole deal, and I still don't have enough telephone numbers of all of these clients. I got no way to contact them.
Okay, I'll show you
how
how to
have
handle
you
that.
done?
Okay, I'll
because
show
I
you
know
how to handle that. So the question is you have clients that have been with you for a long time and all the numbers are out of date. So how do you handle that?
And that's
Very
life
simple.
insurance too, right?
Exactly, yes. Very simple. What you do is you send them a letter, and on the outside of the envelope, you put urgent diagonal, okay, and you highlight it with yellow highlighter. And then on the inside, you put, you know, hey, we've been trying to reach you, we have an out-of-date number, it's important that we talk to you immediately. And that's it. The less information, the better. That's the one that works. We tried a million different ways, but when we send that, 80% of the time we get somebody who calls immediately and goes, well, what is it? What is it? We just wanted to tell you we love you. We just need to know. They're not going to call. Like if you write, hey, this is, hey, no worries, everything's good, but call me anyway, they won't call you. Okay? So you just say urgent, call immediately. Okay.
And one other food for thought. Don't put a picture of Roy. Or else they're not calling back.
Well, Ann's in there too.
Glenn? Yeah?
Howard, first of all, thank you for you being here today. You clarified a lot for us. I know Keith's been telling us to follow up with our clients over and over.
Now you're gonna listen?
Nobody listens.
But let's say you wanted to incorporate training on securities into your business.
Yeah.
Without going too overboard, right?
Yeah.
And keeping it simple, what would you do during the course of the week or the month?
Well, there's a couple things that you can do. For me, what I decided to do is every week on Monday mornings I do at the office a Q&A, type of thing. You can bring in wholesalers. So if you feel like, hey, I'm not that person, which is fine, you don't have to be there, but you just want to override those people, you can just bring in wholesalers. And by the way, I said American funds because Keith asked me, but you notice I wouldn't have mentioned it otherwise because I'm not trying to create challenges in your world. So for those of you that are not VPs, do not go to your VP and say, we have to change everything because that's what Howard said, okay? Trust me, the company did $7 billion last year, okay? $6.9 billion of it was not American funds, okay? They're doing just fine without that, even if it is my personal preference. So bring in whoever the wholesalers you want. You can have somebody from Lincoln or AIG or whatever. And the nice thing, just do it on a regular basis. You can give them 30 minutes and you can do, 20 minutes where they talk and 10 minutes of Q&A. And what you'll find is after a while, your team will start getting comfortable with the language, the terminology of it. My experience is that when people get newly securities licensed people, it's very difficult for them to go out and do lump sum rollovers. 100,000, $250,000, it's just too intimidating for them. They don't have the language. The easiest thing to do is just set them up on appointments where they can do PACs, the invest the difference. Here's somebody who needs $50 a month. If you have directs in the business that need to open up an investment, you take somebody else that has the license, you go here, you open it up for them. And you give them 4, 5, 6, 7 times so they start talking what a Roth is, what a mutual fund is, what a sale. Listen, I don't want you to feel any pressure. Why don't we just push off the time for us to get together to review the financial needs analysis for when you're ready for this. Now, if you go backwards, what I actually say is, let's say I was talking to Keith, I'd say, Keith, I want you to know I put a lot of time in your financial needs analysis. Things are looking great. I think you're going to be really excited about it. I think it's able to address all the issues that we talked about. Of course, you'll be the sole judge of it. I just have 2 quick questions for you. One, do you get paid bi-weekly or semi-monthly? Doesn't matter what the question is. He tells me, and then I say, by the way, how are you coming along on those introductions? If he says, well, I got 2, but I don't have 3, or I have 3, but I don't have 6, or I have 6, but I don't have 10, or whatever, no problem. Are you confident that you'll be able to have that done by Saturday? Or would you prefer just to push this back a little bit? And I don't want you to feel pressure, right? But obviously it's a big part of my compensation, so if we need to, we can push it back. And what people always say universally is, no, I really want you to come. I'll get it done, right? So what I tell them to say is just very simple. There's no magic to it. If you get your client excited, they figure out the right thing to say. So I tell them, look, there's 3 things I want you to get across when you ask these people for permission. Number 1, explain to them I'm working with you in a financial capacity. You can explain it any way you want. Number 2, let them know that it's just a quick call. And number 3, that it doesn't commit me and it doesn't commit them. I don't charge for my time. I don't agree to meet with everybody, but I'd be happy to talk it through over the phone with them. That's it.
Thank you.
How do you handle follow-up for terminated agents, their list, right? We have a lot of people working
Yes.
here with a lot of accounts.
Yep.
I'm sure it's pretty similar, but what is your take on that?
Okay, so I have A and B clients. So my A clients are the ones that I personally did business with. My B clients are the ones that rolled up to me. I have one assistant that calls my A clients, one assistant that calls my B clients, okay? If any of the B clients become meaning I go and do additional business, they move over to A for me, okay? The B clients get the same basic calls that the A do, but it's just, hey, we know that, your account had been opened up by so-and-so. They worked for Howard 10 years ago. Howard's taking over responsibility. You'll get a call every 90 days. You ever need anything? Howard loves working with people. And from that point forward, boom, it's the baton has been passed and it's done. Yep. Okay?
And they hear Howard Lashner 4 times a year.
Exactly. 4 times a year.
Give him a hand, it was awesome. Good stuff, huh, guys? Hey, that presentation, Howard, is it okay if I give Howard that presentation out to the RVPs? The one you just did today, so some of you people were taking notes, some of you were taking pictures of it. My recommendation is this, everybody write this down. My recommendation is you get this book for yourself and read that book. I think it's awesome. If you haven't, how many of you read the book already? Both of you, excellent. Okay, no, good. A bunch of you, that's excellent. And hey, I just wanted to it just in wrapping up and not taking away, but kind of adding to, I wrote a couple things down. I see a lot of people start out in Primerica and they see the recruiting and the building and the distribution, and that's the thing that motivates them. I bet you Howard didn't see, oh my God, someday Primerica is going to do indexed annuities, okay? Or someday, you know, people don't get involved with the mutual fund side. Most of us in this room saw opportunity meeting in the opportunity, not product in the opportunity meeting. And then we saw overrides, right? The two O's in NC used to talk about all the time, the ownership and the overrides. The challenge is some of us deal with recruits, and we recruit some people, take them on board, we invest some time and energy, and then what happens is sometimes people wean out. And it's almost like getting that verbal smack from somebody, and then we recruit another person, we train, we develop, and then they leave, and recruit, train. And what happens is you don't get the law of large numbers working for you, and you stop recruiting. We actually end up by chasing, the longer somebody's here, we end up by chasing the short-term income versus building distribution, right? The thing I love about what Howard did today, every single thing is not personality-driven, it's system-driven. And if you want to have distribution, you've got to have systematic things in place. Some of you have phenomenal personalities. Problem is that's not copyable, right? So the thing that I love about what he did is the distribution side, it can be copied. Every single one of the things can be copied. And I look at that, and the first thing I think is, I know a lot of us, I know a lot of you, I know your numbers, but I know a lot of you in the room for years. And some of us in this room got off recruiting. Some of you are on recruiting like I've never seen anybody on before, which is incredible. But some of us got off recruiting. Some of us got off building life licenses and then building securities license and building distribution. I look at what Howard talked about, and just like he said, the first couple words out of his mouth is, add to, don't take from, right?
Right.
I also heard him say he puts in 15 hours a week. So he puts in 15 hours a week and makes $1 million a year in securities. You could put in 15 hours a week and make an extra $100,000 a year in securities. And there's not enough people in this room that make 100 or 200 or 300,000 just in investments. Why? Because there's zero time being invested. And if you pull up, we're all friggin' busy doing things, but the truth is, it's like that mirror is the numbers at the end of the month. He said, we check results. And if you look at results, a lot of us are busy doing very non-busy shit. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be recruiting and building. I didn't invite you down here because we need to slow up recruiting and building. We need to continue to recruit, train, and develop people because Howard was recruited. Everyone in this room was recruited. And those of us that are able to do securities, and you're doing a great job, but you don't have to be the Lone Ranger either. Show one person how to copy and duplicate what you're doing. Show two people how to do that. And then you build your business. The coolest thing about Primerica is we can build our business any way we want. We can continue to grow. So I heard him say 15 hours a week. And I think if you and I just added 15 hours a week to our downtime, when you take us, if you listen to what Safford said, what is work in Primerica? It's either recruiting, training, or developing somebody direct to you, or prospecting someone. I thought what Miguel Illich, did you like what he said? I thought what he did was just off the charts, okay, which is why I recommended all the RVPs and guys in our base shop to watch it. And not just watch it, but take it personal. And if that knucklehead can go from 0 to 500,000 in 5 years recruiting and building and not doing the stuff Howard talked about, what if you added the stuff Howard talked about and also added in that work ethic of putting time and energy in? And the most important thing is, how do you spell success? How do you spell growth? How do you spell leadership? It's all T-I-M-E. That's how you spell it, time. And we've got to allocate, which is why I'm a freak about a schedule, because your schedule is your accountability to yourself. I want to show you something that, if you could put that up for me, the next thing, I saw this, it was on, I have an AOL account, I think I'm the last guy with AOL. Anyone else have an AOL account? Oh wow, some old people here like me. I didn't realize until a few years ago you don't have to pay for it anymore, so, but I used to still pay. I'm embarrassed to tell you I was paying for my AOL account. But it's always cool when I buy a phone or do something, can I get your email, I give it to them, and they're like, oh, I heard about that company, right? Like, my grandfather had that. So, but if you look at our business right now, and this is what I'm going to show you. This was on AOL, and I pulled, so it has to be true, because it was on the internet. And part of what I want to share with you is there's so many different people and so many different companies. You know, we hear statistics, 90% of businesses go out of business within 5 years. I heard a statistic that said even the businesses that are still in business will never, ever be sold. Because they can't be sold. Not that they don't want to sell them or they don't want to transfer it over. It's not a sellable item. So the ultimate goal in this business is down the road at some point, you're going to want to or have to stop working. And when that time comes, you want to have a tangible value to your business. I think the Enser, Joe Enser, the Enser estate made Joe Enser's estate made more money when he was dead than when he was alive. Fact. It's like Elvis, okay? And the fact of the matter is, because he had a tangible asset, it's a perfect example of ownership in our business. Every single one of us in this room, I took all the owners, we did a little Punta Cana trip. How many of you saw that little video we sent out? Not that video, the other video, right? That video on the Punta Cana trip, which I thought was awesome. We got a chance to spend time with the leaders, but those are the $300,000 earners and above. Those are the owners. And what did we own it? So what you want to own is, what Howard talked about, he's got $100 and something million of assets under management. That's just personal. Do you understand that adds to the value of your business? Your personal production doesn't add to the value of your business, because when you leave, if you cut hair and you sell the salon that you work at, you're not cutting hair anymore. Does that make sense? But your first generation RVPs that produce first generation RVPs that produce has a tangible value. So your assets under management and then the amount of regional vice presidents that you have on your team is what's going to determine and grow your business. The challenge in the real world is there's so many outside influences that affect somebody's business. Right? One problem is you don't have a successful business. The second problem is once it becomes successful, people copy. How many ever took an Uber? No one took an Uber 15 years ago. Maybe you took a Goober, but you didn't take an Uber, right? And then how many of you have taken a Lyft? Do you understand once Lyft started, it took business from Uber? I was listening to someone talk about the medallions, right? A client of mine, he had medallions. How many of you have clients that are taxi, right? And well, they wanted to own medallions because they had a lot of value. Those medallions aren't worth what they were used to be worth, right or wrong? Why? Because the medallion business went down? No, because Uber took over the taxi business. And then Lyft took money from them. My father-in-law owns a pizzeria down the street here, this way. He has a pizzeria, and then all of a sudden, years later, after doing successful business, a guy opens up a pizzeria 2 blocks away. And his pizza business went down. Now my father-in-law's name is Vinny Colombo, so he visited him and let him know financially and physically it wouldn't be good for him to continue that. So mysteriously the business went out of business. But anyway, while that business was in business, it affected his business. Does that make sense? McDonald's burnt down across the street from his pizzeria. I'm not saying he did it. I'm not saying he did. No. He wasn't even in town. His pizzeria, true story, his pizzeria was doing business. McDonald's opens up a place and his business goes down. McDonald's burns down, his business doubles. McDonald's rebuilds it. And it's still there, okay? And it affects his business, right? So when you look at how many companies out there, nothing affects or anything, right? There's not another company that does what we do, right? Geico, what does Geico sell? They don't sell life, investments, annuities, and managed account, right or wrong? Right? Most people what does Fidelity sell? Any person that most of our clients do business with doesn't cross-sell, just like he said, you want to create, Howard Lashner created a brand. Right? Some of you in this room have created a brand. You can create a brand in your business and we have no competition. We've got opposition. And if you listen to his message today, the opposition actually creates a bigger market for us.
That's right.
People go, oh, people put money in a 401k. Exactly, and that's the money we're going to roll over. Right? People put money in a CD. Exactly, that's the money that we're going to roll over. That's the money we're going to transfer. That's the money we're going to invest. There's 900 life insurance companies out there. People go, you must hate the industry. I actually love the industry. They're going to sell it. We'll follow right up behind them and replace the crowd. And if they don't have it, which 59% of people, worse than whole life is no life, right? 59% of people have no life insurance, but most of the people who have no life insurance had it before and let it lapse or whatever because it was too expensive. There was so much money. We're in the money business. There's so much money in the money business that we grow, and we have no opposition. So I want to just go through this real quickly, Wilma. If you look, first one, if you look at, this is Papa John's, right? Papa John's, 85 stores are going down. Next, please. Oh, you know why Papa John said 85 stores are closing? Because the NFL had protests 2 years ago. And if you think about it, well, people watch football, they order pizza, right? And they would do a lot of pizza business. All of a sudden, the NFL protests, it slowed up a little bit, and they closed down 85 stores. Chipotle, how many have kids? They love that crap, right? Chipotle. 65 stores closed down. Why? Because they lose trust after an E. coli breakout. You could have an E. coli breakout in your house. Does that mean you're going to stop eating? But what happens is because of that, outside things affected it, didn't it? Next, please. Tim Hortons. 85 stores closed down. Why? Because Starbucks and McDonald's expanded their breakfast. You see, if you notice, you go to McDonald's, some of the fast foods, they serve breakfast all day. Remember, you used to pull in there at 10 o'clock, 10 or 11 o'clock, like, shit, can't get eggs, right? I eat between 12 o'clock and 8 o'clock. I fast a little bit sometimes, and sometimes I slow. But so I don't eat in the morning, but I love breakfast. So I go to my country club, I'll go to a restaurant, I'm like, do you guys have breakfast? They're like, bro, it's 2 o'clock. I'm like, I know, but I want breakfast, right? So, so Tim Hortons right now, they closed a bunch of stores down because outside influences, right? Outback, 43 of them dropped down because of a PR disaster. 1965, next please. Subway was founded. They're closing 500 stores. 500 stores. And so, why? Because in the 60s, that was a healthy alternative. Even McDonald's has a healthy alternative now. Salad, right? But they had a healthy alternative. What's fashionable right now is healthy, gluten-free. You guys with me on that? So what happens is because there's so many more healthy alternatives, how many in this room don't eat meat? A bunch of you. You would have said that a few years ago. What are you, smoking crack? What are you doing, drugs? Right? But it's more popular now. Does that make sense? Right. And so because of that, Subway was the healthy alternative. But now every other place has a healthy alternative. And because of that, it affects the business. Does that make sense? Right. IHOP. 10 straight quarters of a decline. Closing down 40 stores. And, yeah, keep going. Noodles and Company, that's Glenn Lee's place. I'm sorry, 55 stores he's closing down. I'm only kidding. Right? Cheesecake Factory. They should have closed that shit down years ago. You ever go there? It's like taking a test. It's like 17 grade. Joe's Crab Shack. I belong to a boat club in Naples, and you know where our marina is? It's right where Joe's Crab House used to be. They closed it down and they built a marina, right? Right? Applebee's. Once Glenn left, the business went to 189 stores closed down. If you can put up that last one too, and I'm not going to go through the whole presentation. Actually, don't do that. I'm going to just wrap up. I'm going to wrap up. All right. But if you look at, here's my modulator. I want to just wrap up with some thoughts as I was listening to what Howard was saying. Okay. And he said you can reinvent yourself. I did a talk years ago talking about it's how you show up. See, how do you show up? picked a couple people out of the audience right now and I said, hey, who in this room is great at annuities? You'd pick 2 or 3 people that are good at annuities. If I said, who's a big recruiter? You'd say, oh, this guy's a big recruiter, or she's a big recruiter. That's how they show up. You and I could change, just like he said, you could change how you show up. You ever hear people say, you're not the same person that you used to be 12 months ago, and physically you're not. Because I read a book one time, and it talked about your cells in your body die off and then replenish, right or wrong? Right. So we're constantly, now physically we're the same, but actually we're not the same inside as we were 12 or 18 or 24 months ago for most of us, right? And so you can change how you show up. Some of you go, I'm not good at securities. You've made that decision. You've got to add that to your portfolio. Some of you are doing securities, I'm recruiting. You've got to add that to your portfolio. It amazes me. I have people that say to me, well, I don't understand, man. There's people that do a ton of securities, and they go, it's buy term and invest the difference, right? And I always go, yeah. They go, why do you have people that do a lot of life insurance but don't do securities? We do a lot of securities. I go, why do you do a lot of securities but don't do a lot of life? Because they ask me that about you. See, I think, why not do everything? Yep. When Sandy Weil took over A.L. Williams back in the day and changed it to A.L. Williams, a Primerica company, one of the things that he's talked about, it was all over the place for a while, is I want to create a one-stop financial services supermarket with home delivery. I want to own a King's. I want to own a Costco. Does that make sense? I don't want to. 100 years ago, I had an apartment in Manhattan. It's still like that a little bit in Manhattan, but it's even changed that a little bit, right? Like you go to Whole Foods, you could buy anything in Whole Foods. 30, 40 years ago, you wanted meat, you went to the butcher. You wanted bread, you go to the bakery, right? You wanted sex, you went to a massage parlor. You want fish, you go to the fish. Right? Everything's changed. Now, stay focused, guys. That was from Patriots owner. But if you stay focused here. But if you think about it right now, there's a lot. My uncle, I was with my uncle, Produce Pete. You ever know who Produce Pete is? He was at my house the last couple of days. I couldn't get rid of him in Florida. And Produce Pete used to have a store right down the street I worked at, Napolitano's Produce. That is an old-fashioned way to own a business right now. Why? Because the industry changed. You could go to the King's Supermarket or Whole Foods and get produce just as fresh as Produce Pete. Yeah. So we want to build a financial services supermarket with home delivery. So the question is, why would you put your pen down before you're done writing your story? See, your business, it doesn't matter. I love the concept of flipping a coin because you still have, right? The past doesn't determine your future. How you start is not how you finish. How 2018 ended up. Howard, if you would have asked somebody 10 years ago, 15 years ago, he was knowledgeable about investments. But he's a recruiter. He's a pure recruiter. Hey, we want Howard to talk about investments. Why would you ask Howard? Because he's a pure recruiter. How did he show up? He showed up as a recruiter. He showed up as someone who's knowledgeable. He showed up as someone who built a client base. You can add to your financial services supermarket anytime you want. Does that make sense? Yeah. Another thing is, listen, I know on Facebook and Instagram, there's a bunch of people in Primerica, I'm not going to mention any names, but post stuff about, I post stuff about my life, and a lot of times, I leave shit off. I do. I leave stuff off because it sounds a little bit over the top, right? But if I'm in front of a private plane, I'm not gonna Photoshop it out, okay? But I don't post that so people go, oh, look at the shit I got, right? So there's people that post that, and the focus should be is down the road, save your money, invest your money, and then there's a bunch of money you can invest and spend and do what you want to do with, okay? Take care of your financial house. But I said it earlier, save yourself broke. Yep. Right? Even though we live in I got nice cars. If people say to me, well, dude, how much do you spend on cars and houses and travel? A shitload. But I save more than I spent. You with me? Yep. So make sure that you put yourself, live below our means. Let's do the things for ourselves that we want to do for clients. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. And understand, comfort is the enemy of success. And some of us in this room, you're not bad people. You're not a non-builder. You're not, well, this is some primary, you know, I didn't get lucky. You're not lucky. We think that because we justify it. The challenge is we get comfortable. And if you're comfortable, that's awesome. Right? I have guys that used to apologize. Right? I did an RVP meeting actually in Englewood down the street here 4 years ago. I remember putting it together. It took me 4 hours to put it together, and I put it together. I had guys making $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, $300,000 a year, $500,000 a million. Who did just securities, had no licenses on their team. Who did just recruiting, isn't even securities licensed. You with me? Who did this? You can pick and choose how you want to build your own business. You don't have to apologize. It's your business. But most of us, given an opportunity to have multiple sources of income, would want to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I know this. Building and recruiting is like riding a bike downhill. If you want to add securities and investments and life insurance. Does that make sense? Sales without recruiting is like riding a bike uphill. When you've got recruiting and building, now they call it tickets, right? He says, you know, you're going to recruit people you got on here, new associates, old associates, right? Most of the bigger investments that we've done for clients back in the day were people that we recruited, we built rapport with, and all of a sudden they go, hey, by the way, I've got 800,000 sitting here. I've got $1.4 million sitting here. My uncle's got $1.9 million. It always comes back to, I talked to someone. So keep that recruiting in the building, continue while you're growing it, right?
Yep.
And the only way some of us get burnt out. Let me tell you why we get burnt out. We get burnt out spending and wasting our time with the wrong people.
Amen.
Versus investing our time with the right people. And if you find the right people, they'll take off. If you find the right people, they're self-taught. You don't teach them, they learn the business. I just recruited a kid that was my cable guy in Florida. Came, he's looking at my house, he's like, how many TVs? He got all excited because I had 16 TVs or whatever. For a cable guy, that's like an erection, right? So, he comes to my house and he looks at my garage, he goes, oh my God, he goes, I feel like I'm on a movie set. I go, all right, you done, dude? My TV's not working, right? So, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, he goes, what do you do for a living? I go, I'm a plumber. Right? So I'm bullshit with him back and forth. I ended up by recruiting a guy. Quit his job at Cablevision. He got another job part-time because that would have interfered with him building a business. Just like Joe Webster said to you, you don't have enough time to become successful, right? So if you look at that, or is $150,000 all you're worth, or you think that's all you're worth as a judge. So what I said to this guy is, let's set up a game plan. He just got licensed like in October, November with me. He's going to double-digit recruit. He's got 7 people going to licensing school this weekend. And my wife says to me the other day, wow, that guy's doing good. Well, what are you doing with him? Nothing. Because he's a leader. Because he's self-taught. He takes, like, it cracks me out. Oh, Bob Safford taught me a lot. If Bob Safford taught him a lot, then why didn't Bob Safford teach everybody a lot? Right. You with me? Right. Joe Enser taught me a lot. Joe Enser didn't teach you shit. You learned a lot from Joe Enser. You might have learned a lot from Bob Safford, but they didn't teach you. And so we just got to make sure that we're working the numbers and allow people to come through. But we've got to make sure that we're not wasting our time. And I'm not saying you walk in your office on Saturday morning or Monday morning marriage meeting where you have to, oh, don't waste my time. I'm not saying that. But you should not be investing your time. I just recruited this kid. I took him out on a couple appointments. I did his F&A. My wife goes, are you really doing an appointment on a Sunday? I go, babe, I got to go. I grab my bag. I go, babe, listen, I don't know what time to be back. I got appointments. She goes, don't be an asshole. Where are you going? You get a massage? I go, no. I'm the real massage. So I have an appointment. She goes, what do you haven't said that in 20 years. I go, I know, but I got one today, right? I did, why? Because he was the right person. I'm not going to go out field training. How many times? 80% of people in Primerica, and I'm being nice, do not get licensed. And yet we spend and waste our time training and developing people that will never get licensed. So the greatest thing is make sure you're investing time when people do get licensed, and the ones that get securities licensed, and then the ones that show up. Does that make sense, guys? So we got to make sure we're investing time in the right areas. And Art Williams used to talk about 7 to 10 key people. You want to build a business? I did a whole thing on building until it's built. What's built is, it used to be 10 first generation RVPs making $100,000 a year. And I don't care if you focus a lot of your time in recruiting, you focus a lot of time in personal production, you focus a lot of your time on investments. All you've got to do is, while you're doing whatever you're doing, damn it, just tell the Primerica story. All he did was ask a bunch of questions. We videotaped that. I bet you if I play that back, Howard's presentation is a crap load of questions. Why? And if we ask the right questions, we'll get the right answers. Does that make sense? Yes. Well, Art Williams said 7 to 10 key people. What's a key person? Someone that likes you, trusts you. Yep, someone who's an RVP, direct to you, making 6 figures. That becomes an independent player, team player, but independent. That's changed now because the company changed its circle of champions. Now it's 18. I was talking to Sal Faraj, who shares an office with me in Florida, and he said, he got up there, he goes, I just recruited 2 new directs, I got some stuff, he goes, my goal was to get to 10 first generation RVPs. He goes, I got 10 first generation RVPs. All of a sudden the company announced a new ring. He goes, now my goal is 18. And I go, dude, you're back to work for a new ring? He goes, well, Super Bowl guys, the people that want to win the Super Bowl go back for the ring, for the championship. The guys that fight want to win the belt. Does that make sense? Yes. And so the new norm is 18 directs. So while you're doing what you're doing, don't beat yourself up based upon your past performance, but let's increase what we got going forward, right or wrong. Yeah. And one thing too, there's people in the investment business. There's people in the insurance business. They don't have what we have. And the more confident and the more competent you get, the better opportunity you have to recruit people like that. You know, all you got to say is, why would you work in the richest, most residual business in the world and not have ownership? Because people that own a State Farm or people that own an investment, how many times you recruit somebody and they don't take their block of business with them? Because they can't. So why would somebody build a huge business and not have ownership? We've got a shot, an opportunity to have true ownership. Does that make sense, guys? Yes. All right. And Howard, I appreciate what you did today. It was absolutely incredible. And give him another hand. Don't bombard him with a bunch of questions too right now. You know, I said he has a headache, right? But don't don't call him on Monday morning with 18 more questions. Every question you have, call Cardino's office. He will handle and feed all those questions and get them over now. All right, any other questions for today? Those of you that didn't pick up your leadership